My daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye and smiled as she secretly installed a spyware app on my phone. She thought she was stealing banking access from a confused 71-year-old retired mechanic who could barely work a television remote. She thought she had found the perfect victim in a man she considered a burden to her social status. What she did not know was that she was actually hacking into a federal sting operation run by the FBI Cyber Division. And she certainly did not know that the man sitting across from her, the man she mocked for his trembling hands, was Agent Winston King, a consultant for the Bureau with 40 years of field experience. By the time she realized her mistake, she had already signed her own federal indictment. Before I tell you how I turned her greed into the greatest trap of my career, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to love you. The Sunday roast was dry, but the tension at the table was suffocating. I sat at the end of the mahogany dining table, a piece of furniture I had paid for 3 years ago when my son Jordan and his wife Jessica claimed they were short on cash. Now I was treated like a stain on the upholstery. My hands were resting on the tablecloth, deliberately shaking just a little. It was a tremor I had perfected over the last year, a camouflage that made people look past me. Jessica reached across the table, her manicured fingers snatching my smartphone from beside my plate. Her movement was fast, aggressive, like a hawk diving for a field mouse. "Oh, Dad, you have so many notifications cluttering up your screen," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she reserved for when she wanted something. "Let me clear these for you. And I need to install that new heart rate monitor app Jordan was talking about. You know, for your health." She did not wait for my permission. She never did. She tapped in my passcode, which she had memorized weeks ago when she thought I was napping on the couch. I took a slow sip of water, my eyes narrowing just a fraction behind my reading glasses. To anyone else, I looked like a passive old man waiting for his daughter-in-law to help him. But I was not looking at her face. I was looking at the reflection in the crystal wine glass positioned perfectly to her right. Decades of surveillance work do not just vanish when you retire. My vision might have needed correction, but my situational awareness was sharper than a razor. In the distorted reflection of the glass, I saw her thumb moving rapidly. She was not clearing notifications. She was bypassing the security warnings in the settings menu. I watched the screen reflection flicker. She was downloading a file named Health Monitor, APK. It was a clumsy, commercially available piece of malware often sold on the dark web to jealous spouses or small-time scammers. I recognized the interface immediately. It was a keylogger with screen mirroring capabilities. It meant every password I typed, every message I sent, and every bank account I accessed would be sent directly to a server she controlled. She was not trying to help me monitor my heart. She was trying to monitor my net worth. There. "All done," Jessica said, sliding the phone back across the table. Her blue eyes sparkled with a malice she did not even bother to hide. "Now we can make sure you stay healthy, Dad. We would not want anything to happen to you." Under the table, I felt the vibration of her foot kicking my son Jordan. It was a signal. The bait had been set. Jordan, my only son. The boy I had raised to be honest and strong, looked down at his plate. He knew. Or at least he suspected. He cut his roast beef in silence, refusing to meet my gaze. That hurt more than the malware. The woman was an enemy, and enemies I could handle. But the boy I had carried on my shoulders was now an accomplice to my humiliation. I reached for the phone. I let my hand tremble violently this time, fumbling to grip the device. I dropped my fork onto the china plate with a loud clatter. Jessica sighed, a loud, exaggerated sound of exhaustion. "Jordan, maybe you should cut your father's meat for him. He is making a mess." "It is fine," I mumbled, keeping my voice low and raspy. "Just slipped. Thank you for the app, Jessica. I appreciate you looking out for me." My internal monologue, however, was speaking in a very different voice. It was the voice of Special Agent King, the man who had taken down organized crime syndicates in Chicago and dismantled credit card fraud rings in Miami. Target identified, I thought. Hostile action confirmed. Counterintelligence protocols initiated. I looked down at my hand. There was a faint white scar running across my knuckles, a souvenir from a knife fight during a raid in '98. I had nearly lost the use of my hand that night protecting a witness. Now that same hand was being mocked by a woman whose biggest struggle in life was deciding which luxury car to lease. The audacity was almost impressive. Jessica was a marketing director for a mid-level fashion brand. She made decent money, but she spent it faster than she earned it. I had seen the overdue notices she tried to hide in the trash. I knew about the credit card debt she was drowning in. She looked at me, a 71-year-old black man who spent his days listening to jazz records and wearing cardigans, and she assumed I was poor. Or rather, she assumed I was sitting on a small pile of retirement savings that she could drain dry before putting me in a state-run nursing home. She had no idea that my pension from the Bureau was substantial. She had no idea about the consulting fees I still earned advising on high-level cybersecurity threats. And she certainly did not know that the banking app on my phone was a dummy interface I used for testing security flaws. So Dad, Jessica said, taking a sip of her wine, "Have you thought more about the assisted living facility? The brochures I left on your dresser." I unlocked my phone deliberately, moving my thumb slowly. I saw the tiny icon of the new app hidden in a folder. It was active. It was recording. "I am fine here, Jessica," I said. "This is my home." "For now," she muttered, smiling at Jordan. The disrespect was palpable. It hung in the air like smoke. But in my line of work, you do not react to the insult. You react to the intent. If I confronted her now, she would deny it. She would say I was paranoid, senile, confused. She would gaslight Jordan into believing his father was losing his mind. She would wipe the phone, delete the evidence, and try a different angle later. No. You do not catch a predator by scaring them away. You catch them by letting them think they have already won. I finished my meal in silence, enduring their conversation about vacations they could not afford and renovations they wanted to do to my house once I was gone. "Excuse me," I said, pushing my chair back. "I need to rest. My head is aching." "Do not forget to check your bank balance, Dad," Jessica called out as I walked toward the hallway. "You know, to make sure your pension came in. You sometimes forget." I walked to my bedroom, the guest room on the ground floor. It used to be my study, but when I let them move in, they took the master suite upstairs. I closed the door and locked it. The click of the deadbolt was the only sound in the room. I sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled, letting the frail old man posture drop from my shoulders. I straightened my spine, my eyes cleared. I pulled a sleek, encrypted laptop from under the loose floorboard beneath my nightstand, a device that did not exist on any consumer market. I placed my phone on the desk and plugged it into the laptop. I did not uninstall her malware. That would be amateur hour. If the signal stopped, she would know I was onto her. Instead, I opened a terminal window and began to type. The code flowed from my fingers with the rhythm of a jazz pianist. System diagnostic running. Keylogger detected. Source IP localized to the master bedroom upstairs. She was upstairs right now, probably watching her own laptop, waiting for the data stream to start. She was waiting for me to log into my bank. She wanted my username. She wanted my password. "You want access?" "Jessica," I whispered to the empty room, "I will give you access." I opened a sandbox environment, a digital quarantine zone. I began to construct a fabrication. I wasn't going to show her my real accounts. I was going to show her a honeypot. In the world of cyber espionage, a honeypot is a decoy system designed to lure attackers. It looks real, it acts real, but everything inside it is a trap. I created an interface that mirrored the Bank of America mobile app perfectly. But the numbers she would see were not my savings. I linked the display to a dummy account used by the Bureau for baiting money launderers. It was a flagged account monitored 24/7 by federal algorithms. Any transaction made from that account would trigger a level 5 security alert at Quantico. I typed in the balance I wanted her to see. I paused, my finger hovering over the enter key. I could stop this now. I could just walk out there, throw the phone in her face, and kick them both out. But then I thought of Jordan. My son was weak, yes, but he was blinded by this woman. If I kicked them out, he would hate me. He would see me as the villain. I needed him to see her for what she truly was. I needed him to see her in handcuffs. I typed in the number $4,500,000. It was a ridiculous number for a retired mechanic. But greed is a powerful blinder. Jessica wouldn't question where the money came from. She wouldn't ask if it was legal. She would only see the zeros. She would only see the Porsche. She wanted the trips to Paris, the freedom from her own failures. I saved the configuration. I disconnected the phone. Then, loud enough for the microphone on the phone to pick up, I muttered to myself, acting the part again. "Let me just check if the Social Security check came in. I hope I have enough for my medicine." I opened the fake banking app. I typed in my credentials slowly, one number at a time. I knew that upstairs on her screen, Jessica was watching every keystroke. She was holding her breath. I hit login. I stared at the screen for a moment, then let out a gasp. A genuine theatrical gasp. "Oh my lord," I whispered. They finally transferred the settlement. It is all there. I waited. It took exactly 10 seconds. Upstairs, I heard a thud as if something heavy had been dropped. Then a shriek. It was muffled by the ceiling but unmistakable. It was not a shriek of fear. It was a shriek of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. Then came the hurried footsteps. I heard Jessica running across the floor above my head. She was pacing. She was panicking with joy. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of the laptop illuminating my face. The trap was set. The mouse had smelled the cheese. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. I looked at the framed photo of my late wife Betty on the nightstand. She had always told me I was too hard on people, that I needed to trust more. "I tried, Betty," I whispered. "I tried to be just a father. But they do not want a father. They want a bank." My phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number, but I knew who it was. It was the automated system from the Bureau confirming the connection. "Alert: unauthorized monitoring detected on device WK-71. Trace active." I deleted the message. I turned off the light and lay down on the bed fully dressed. I knew I would not sleep. Tonight was the beginning of the end for Jessica Thorne. She had invited the devil to dinner, and she had forgotten that the devil used to wear a badge. The game had officially begun. And unlike Jessica, I did not play for money. I played for justice. The door to my bedroom clicked shut, and the mask of the frail, trembling old man dropped instantly. My posture straightened. The curvature of my spine, which I exaggerated for their benefit, vanished. I walked to the window and pulled the blinds tight, leaving only a sliver of street lamp light cutting across the floor. To Jessica and Jordan, this room was a storage closet they generously allowed me to sleep in. To me, it was a forward operating base. I sat at my desk and pulled the loose floorboard up. Beneath the dust and insulation lay a matte black Pelican case. Inside rested my laptop. It was a unit that did not exist on Best Buy shelves. It was air-gapped, meaning it had never touched a public Wi-Fi network in its life. It ran on a custom Linux kernel developed by the Bureau specifically for field agents operating in compromised environments. I plugged my phone into the data port. On the screen, the code for Jessica's spyware scrolled past like a waterfall of green text. It was sloppy work. She had bought a premium subscription to a stalker app, likely using my son's credit card to pay for it. It was designed to harvest data keylogs and screen captures every time I opened a financial application. She wanted to see my poverty. She wanted to confirm that I was broke so she could justify sending me to a state-funded nursing home. I could have blocked it with a single keystroke. I could have fried her phone remotely. But that is not how you catch a predator. You do not scare the game away. You put out fresh meat. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. The sound was rhythmic, comforting. I was not just writing code. I was composing a symphony of deception. I opened a sandbox environment and began to construct the trap. I wasn't going to show her my real bank account, which held a respectable but modest pension. I was going to show her a ghost. I accessed a dormant server node used by the Financial Crimes Division. We called it the honeypot. It was a network of dummy accounts created to entrap international money launderers. These accounts looked real. They had routing numbers, transaction histories, and official-looking statements. But every cent inside them was digital fiction monitored 24/7 by federal algorithms. I linked the interface on my phone to one of these black budget accounts. Now came the most important decision of the night, the bait. If I made the number too high, like 50 million, she would think it was a glitch. If I made it too low, she would not care. I needed a number that was life-changing. A number that would short-circuit her moral compass and activate pure, unadulterated greed. I typed it in. $4,500,000. It was a beautiful number. It was enough to buy the mansion she always talked about. It was enough to buy the Porsche she had saved as her screensaver. It was enough to make her forget that she hated me. I added a transaction label for the deposit settlement payment, case 892-alpha. Vague enough to sound legal, specific enough to sound official. I set the effective date for midnight. The trap was armed. I disconnected the phone and placed it on the nightstand. I put the laptop back under the floorboard and slid the rug over the spot. Then I did something I had not done in years. I slept soundly. There is a specific kind of peace that comes when you know your enemy has already stepped on the landmine and all you are waiting for is the click. The next morning, the house was silent. It was Monday, but Jessica often took mornings off to recover from her weekend social climbing. I shuffled into the kitchen wearing my faded robe and worn-out slippers. I made a pot of coffee, deliberately spilling a few grounds on the counter to maintain my cover as the clumsy old man. I sat at the kitchen island sipping the bitter brew. My phone sat on the counter face up. Upstairs, I heard the shower running. Jessica was getting ready. I reached out and unlocked my phone. I opened the banking app. I knew that the moment the app launched, her spyware would take a screenshot and send a push notification to her device. I stared at the screen. The dummy account loaded. The numbers flashed in bold green font. Total balance $4,500,000. I held the app open for exactly 10 seconds, ensuring the data packet had time to upload to her cloud server. Then I closed it and put the phone in my pocket. 3 seconds later, the water in the shower upstairs stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a brain trying to process impossible information. Then came the sound. It started as a gasp, loud enough to echo through the ventilation ducts. Then a shriek. It wasn't a scream of terror. It was the sound a prospector makes when he strikes gold in the mud. Oh my God, oh my God! I heard the bathroom door slam open. Wet footsteps slapped against the hardwood floor of the master bedroom. She was running. She wasn't running to tell Jordan. She was running to look at her phone again, to zoom in on the screenshot to count the zeros. I took another sip of coffee. My heart rate remained steady at 62 beats per minute. I heard her voice muffled but frantic. She was talking to herself. 4 million. 4.5 million. He has $4 million. That old bag of bones is a millionaire. I heard something crash upstairs, maybe a bottle of lotion or a hairdryer knocked over in her haste. She was hyperventilating. This was the reaction of a woman who had just realized that the useless luggage she wanted to throw away was actually a winning lottery ticket. A few minutes later, the stairs creaked. Jessica came down. She wasn't dressed in her usual power suit. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair still wet, her eyes wide and manic. She looked at me sitting there with my coffee. Usually she would walk past me without a word or perhaps make a snide comment about me taking up space in the kitchen. But not today. Today she stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at me like I was a deity. "Good morning, Dad," she chirped. Her voice was an octave higher than usual. It sounded like glass breaking. I turned slowly, feigning surprise. "Oh, good morning, Jessica. I didn't think you were up yet." She practically skipped into the kitchen. She came right up to me, and for the first time in the 3 years since she married my son, she put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch felt like a branding iron. "I was just thinking," she said, her eyes darting to the pocket where my phone was hidden. "We barely spend any quality time together. You know, I feel like I've been so busy with work I haven't been the best daughter-in-law." I looked at her, blinking confusedly behind my glasses. "Is everything all right, Jessica? You seem excited." "I am just happy," she said, grabbing a mug and pouring herself coffee, her hands shaking with adrenaline. "I just realized how lucky we are to have you here. In fact, I was thinking, Jordan and I were going to look at some boring investment properties later, but maybe you and I should go out for lunch. Somewhere nice. My treat, her treat." I almost laughed. She was offering to buy me lunch with money she didn't have, hoping to get access to the millions she thought I had. "That sounds expensive, Jessica," I mumbled, looking down at my coffee. "I don't want to be a burden." "Oh, stop it," she laughed, a shrill, terrifying sound. "You are family. Dad. Family is never a burden. Plus, we have so much to talk about. The future, your comfort. We really need to make sure you are getting the best care possible." The shift was instantaneous. The assisted living facility brochures that had been on the counter yesterday were gone, swept into the trash. Now she was talking about care. I nodded slowly. "That is very kind of you, Jessica. Very kind." She beamed at me, but her eyes were dead. They were calculators processing the ROI of being nice to me. She was already spending the money in her head. She was already planning how to get her name on that account. "Go get dressed, Dad," she said, ushering me off the stool. "Put on your best suit. We are going to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" I asked innocently. "Life," she exclaimed, her smile stretching so wide it looked painful. "Just life." I walked back to my room to change. As I closed the door, I could hear her frantically dialing a number on her phone. "Jordan. Pick up. You are not going to believe this. Your father. He is loaded. We are rich, Jordan. We are finally rich." I stood in front of the mirror buttoning my shirt. The fabric was old and frayed at the collar. I looked at the man in the reflection. I saw the gray hair, the wrinkles, the tired eyes. But behind that, I saw the agent. The fish had bitten the hook. She had swallowed it whole. Now all I had to do was reel her in inch by painful inch. I checked my watch. The banking algorithm would flag the large deposit for review in 48 hours. I had 2 days. 2 days to let her dig a hole so deep she would never climb out of it. I adjusted my tie, smoothed my jacket, and opened the door. It was time for lunch, and I had a feeling the main course was going to be revenge. The transformation was immediate and terrifyingly artificial. The next morning, the woman who had threatened to put me in a state home was suddenly standing at my bedroom door with a tray of breakfast. Pancakes, fresh fruit, and coffee that wasn't the instant sludge she usually left for me. Jessica was wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a predator's smile, sharp and calculating. "Dad, get dressed," she chirped, setting the tray down. "We are going shopping. You can't be walking around in those old rags anymore. If we are going to manage your future, you need to look the part." I sat up slowly, feigning the stiffness of arthritis. "Shopping?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. "But Jessica, I don't have my wallet." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of ice. "Don't worry about that. Jordan and I will take care of it. Consider it an investment." An investment. That was the key word. She drove me to the most expensive menswear boutique in the city. She didn't look at the price tags. She picked out Italian wool suits, silk ties, and leather shoes that cost more than my first car. When it came time to pay, she pulled out a credit card. I recognized it immediately. It was Jordan's emergency card, the one linked to their joint account, which was already maxed out. She swiped it without hesitation. I stood in front of the three-way mirror, adjusting the collar of a navy blue blazer. I looked at my reflection. For a second, Agent King stared back. Sharp. Dangerous. But then I slumped my shoulders, let my mouth hang slightly open, and became the befuddled old man again. "You look handsome, Dad," Jessica said, standing behind me. Her eyes weren't on me, though. They were on the reflection of the breast pocket, imagining the millions she thought were accessible through the phone tucked inside. That evening, she took me to Le Jardin. It was a 5-star establishment where the waiters wore tuxedos and the menu didn't list prices. Jordan was there too, looking nervous. He kept checking his watch, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden extravagance. "Honey, can we afford this?" Jordan whispered when Jessica ordered a bottle of vintage Cabernet. She kicked him under the table. I felt the impact. "Stop being so cheap, Jordan," she hissed, then turned her beaming face back to me. "We are celebrating family." "Right, Dad." I nodded, taking a sip of water. "Right. Family." Throughout the meal, Jessica was on her phone. To Jordan, it looked like she was checking emails. To me, the seasoned operative, it was obvious she was multitasking. She was running the mirroring app. She was navigating my phone remotely from hers under the table. I kept my phone on the table face up. I knew what was coming. The bait had been taken, and now she was testing the line. She wouldn't drain the account immediately. That would be too suspicious. She needed to see if a transaction would go through without triggering a fraud alert. She needed a test run. My phone buzzed, a silent vibration against the white tablecloth. I glanced down. The screen lit up with a notification from the banking app. Transfer request $5,000 to account ending in 8892. I recognized the account number. It wasn't hers. It was a shell account she had likely set up that afternoon. $5,000, small enough to go unnoticed by a wealthy man, large enough to pay off the minimum balance on her credit cards. "Dad," Jessica said suddenly, leaning forward. Her voice was tight. "Could you check the time on your phone? I think my watch has stopped." It was a clumsy tactic. She needed me to unlock the phone to authorize the push notification. She needed my biometric data, my fingerprint. I looked at her. I saw the bead of sweat on her hairline. She was terrified and exhilarated all at once. I reached for the phone. This was the point of no return. If I approved this transfer, a federal crime would be committed. Wire fraud, elder abuse, grand larceny. I picked up the device. I saw the authorization prompt. Approve transfer. My thumb hovered over the sensor. Inside my head, I wasn't an old man. I was a sniper adjusting for windage. I was a bomb disposal expert cutting the red wire. I looked at Jordan, my son, who was oblivious eating his steak. Then I looked at Jessica. She was holding her breath. I pressed my thumb down. Processing, transaction approved. Jessica let out a long, shaky exhale. She grabbed her wine glass and downed half of it in one gulp. She thought she had just successfully stolen $5,000. She was wrong. The moment my fingerprint hit that sensor, it didn't just authorize a transfer of fake money from a government honeypot. It sent a silent ping to the FBI cybercrime server in Quantico. Operation Baby Shark was live. I had just tagged the money. The digital bills were now radioactive. Wherever that money went, we would see it. If she used it to pay a bill, we would have the account. If she withdrew it as cash, we would have the ATM location. I put the phone back down. "Is there anything else you need, Jessica?" I asked. She smiled a genuine smile this time. A smile of pure, unadulterated greed. "No, Dad. Everything is perfect." The waiter arrived with the bill. Jessica snatched it up before Jordan could reach for it. "Don't worry, sweetie," she told her husband. "I will handle it." She pulled out her phone. I watched as she paid the bill using the $5,000 she had just stolen from me. She was paying for my own dinner with my own compromised funds. The irony was almost poetic. As we walked out of the restaurant, the valet brought the car around. Jessica walked ahead, swinging her hips, intoxicated by her perceived victory. Jordan walked beside me, offering me his arm. "Dad," he said quietly, "I am sorry about before, about how we treated you. Jessica, she has been under a lot of stress, but she is trying." I looked at my son. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to tell him that his wife wasn't stressed, she was criminal. I wanted to tell him that the suit I was wearing was evidence and the dinner we just ate was the first link in a chain that would drag her to prison. But I couldn't. Not yet. The trap needed to be deeper. 5,000 was just a misdemeanor in some jurisdictions. I needed a felony. I needed her to get comfortable. I needed her to get greedy. "She is trying, Jordan," I said, patting his hand. "She is definitely trying something." We got into the car. Jessica turned up the radio, humming along to a pop song. She felt invincible. She had cracked the code. She had the old man wrapped around her finger. I looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. It was a single vibration, a confirmation signal from Special Agent Harper. "Target acquired. Tracking active. Awaiting Phase 2. I closed my eyes and let my head rest against the seat. "Enjoy the music, Jessica," I thought, "because the next song you hear will be the sound of a jail cell slamming shut. You wanted a rich father-in-law, you got the United States government instead. And trust me, we don't do refunds." The floodgates had opened and the house began to fill with the physical evidence of her crime. It started on a Tuesday afternoon with a delivery truck blocking the driveway. I watched from the living room window, sipping my tea with a trembling hand as the driver unloaded box after box. They were not essential items. They were trophies. First came the orange boxes. Hermes. Unmistakable. Jessica tore into them right there in the foyer, pulling out a handbag that cost more than a year of college tuition. She held it up to the light, her eyes dilating with a chemical rush of dopamine. She did not even look at me. To her, I was just part of the furniture, a silent witness she no longer feared because she believed she held the keys to my kingdom. Then came the phone call. I was sitting in my armchair pretending to nap, my breathing shallow and rhythmic, but my ears were tuned to the frequency of her voice in the kitchen. Yes, the McCann GTS in jet black. She was saying, her voice loud and imperious. "I transferred the deposit this morning. $5,000. I want it ready for pickup by Friday, and I want the red leather interior. No, do not tell me it is unavailable. Just make it happen. I have the funds." She hung up and let out a squeal of delight. She was high, not on drugs, but on something far more dangerous. She was high on unearned power. She had dipped her hand into the cookie jar, and because the lid had not slammed down on her fingers yet, she thought she owned the whole bakery. I opened one eye. I saw her dancing around the kitchen island, clutching her new phone. She was scrolling through my fake bank account, watching the balance drop slightly and feeling a thrill of ownership. She had no idea that every dollar she spent was a digital footprint, a breadcrumb trail leading federal agents directly to her doorstep. But the spending was just the symptom. The disease was the manipulation. That evening, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It became heavy, suffocating. I could feel the conversation happening before it even started. Jessica was working on Jordan. I could hear them in the master bedroom above me. Her voice was a hiss, a constant eroding drip of poison. "Look at him, Jordan," she whispered loud enough for the vents to carry her words. "He is hoarding it. $4 million sitting there while we drown in debt. We are living paycheck to paycheck, driving that embarrassing sedan, and he is just sitting on a fortune he will never spend. It is selfish. It is cruel. I heard Jordan mumble something, a weak defense. He is my dad, Jess. It is his money. He does not need it, she snapped. He is 71. What is he going to do? Take it to the grave. If he really loved you, if he really cared about our future, he would give it to us now. He owes you, Jordan. For all the years we have taken care of him, he owes you. Those 2 words hit me harder than any bullet I had ever dodged in the field. I sat in the dark of my room, staring at the ceiling. I thought back to the years when Jordan was a boy, the years I was absent. I was in Colombia dismantling cartels. I was in Eastern Europe tracking cyber terrorists. I told myself I was doing it for him. I was making the world safer for my son. But in doing so, I had left him unprotected in his own home. I had not been there to teach him how to spot a liar. I had not been there to teach him that a man's worth is not measured by his wife's approval. I had hunted wolves my entire life, but I had let a sheep raise my son. And now he was being led to the slaughter by a wolf in designer clothing. The door to my room creaked open. It was Jordan. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He stepped into the room and sat on the edge of my bed. "Dad, are you awake?" he whispered. I shifted, groaning slightly as if waking from a deep sleep. "Jordan, what time is it? Is everything okay?" He rubbed his face with his hands. "Yeah, Dad, everything is fine. We need to talk." I sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. The yellow light cast long shadows across his face. He could not look me in the eye. "What is it, son?" "It is about the future." He started the script Jessica had written for him, stumbling out of his mouth. "Jessica and I, we have been thinking, with the economy the way it is and inflation, money just sitting in a savings account is actually losing value." I stayed silent, letting him dig the hole. "We were thinking," he continued, his voice gaining a desperate sort of momentum, "that maybe it would be smarter if we invested some of your funds, manage them for you. We could put it into real estate or the market. Jessica has a friend who is a broker. We could double your returns, Dad. And we could take a small management fee, just to help us out with the house, since you live here and all." He stopped. The silence stretched between us, thick and painful. I looked at him. I saw the little boy who used to cry when I left for long assignments. I saw the teenager who stopped asking when I would be home. And now I saw the man who was willing to rob his own father because he was too afraid to stand up to his wife. He did not want to do this. I could see the shame burning in his cheeks. But he was weak. And in my world, weakness was just as dangerous as malice. I could have stopped it right there. I could have told him the truth. I could have shown him the badge, the laptop, the sting operation. I could have saved him from the cliff he was about to drive over. But if I saved him now, he would never learn. He would always be the victim. He would always be susceptible to the next Jessica. To save him, I had to let him fall. I had to let him break so I could help him rebuild himself into something stronger. I reached out and placed my hand on his. My hand was steady. His was sweating. "Jordan," I said softly, my voice filled with a sadness he interpreted as senility. "You are a good son. You always have been. If you think this is best, if you think this will help the family, then I trust you." Jordan's head snapped up. He looked shocked. He had expected a fight. He had expected me to be the stubborn old man Jessica described. "Really?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Really, I lied. Whatever you need to do, I just want you to be happy." He let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "Thank you, Dad. You have no idea. This is going to change everything." He stood up, looking relieved, looking almost manic. He backed out of the room, closing the door softly. I heard him running up the stairs. I heard him burst into the master bedroom. I heard Jessica scream with joy. "He did it," he agreed. I turned off the lamp and sat in the darkness. I had just given them permission to hang themselves. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the banking app. Jessica was not wasting time. She had initiated a transfer. Not $5,000 this time. Transfer request $200,000 to account ending in 8892. $200,000. The threshold for grand larceny was far lower than that. This was major league crime. And she was dragging Jordan right into the center of it. I authorized the transfer. The ping went out to Quantico. The trap snapped shut. I lay back on the pillow, staring into the dark. I felt a single tear roll down my cheek. It was not for the money. It was not for the betrayal. It was for the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders, the boy who was now an accomplice to a federal crime. "I am sorry, Jordan," I whispered to the empty room. "This is going to hurt you more than it hurts me. But it is the only way to cut the cancer out. Tomorrow the real pain would begin. Tomorrow the warning I planted would go ignored. And tomorrow Jessica would make the mistake that would end her life as she knew it." I gave her one last chance. A single solitary off-ramp on the highway to her own destruction. In my line of work, we call it a warning shot. It is a courtesy, a final test of character before the lethal force is authorized. I sat in my room, the glow of the encrypted laptop illuminating the deep lines of my face. I was not angry anymore. Anger is a wasteful emotion. I was precise. I was surgical. I navigated to the root directory of my phone using the laptop interface. I created a text file. I did not hide it. I placed it right in the center of the home screen, impossible to miss. I named it in capital letters. Warning: government property, restricted access, penalty of law. Inside the file I wrote a single sentence. Accessing these funds constitutes a federal crime under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It was the truth. It was a lifeline. If she had an ounce of morality or even just an ounce of fear, she would see that file and stop. She would ask herself why a retired mechanic had a file like that. She would ask herself if, maybe, just maybe, she was punching above her weight class. I disconnected the phone and went to the kitchen to make tea. I left the phone on the counter unlocked. I did not have to wait long. Jessica came in humming a tune, her eyes bright with the manic energy of a spending spree. She saw the phone. She checked to see if I was looking. I was busy filling the kettle, my back turned, my shoulders hunched in that deceptive posture of frailty. She swiped the screen. I imagined what she saw, the stark black and white icon of the text file. I heard her scoff. It was a wet, dismissive sound. "What is this?" she muttered to herself. "Government property, please." She laughed. It was a cruel, incredulous laugh. She thought I was senile. She thought I was a delusional old man who copied and pasted legal warnings he found on the internet to make himself feel important. To her, I was not an agent. I was a child playing pretend. I heard the distinct tap of a finger on glass. Then another. She did not open the file. She did not read the warning inside. She selected it and she deleted it. She dragged the warning to the digital trash bin and emptied it. She was scrubbing my phone, cleaning up the clutter, erasing the only thing that could have saved her. "Dad," she called out, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You really need to stop downloading junk files. Viruses are everywhere. I just cleaned up your screen for you." I turned around holding my tea. "Thank you, Jessica," I said softly. "You are always looking out for me." "I am, aren't I?" She smiled. She had just deleted her Miranda rights. She had just ignored the red flag waving right in front of her face. The test was over. She had failed. That night, the motive for her desperation revealed itself. I was monitoring her text messages through the mirror link. A message popped up from a contact named Ricky. Ricky was her younger brother. I had run a background check on him the day she married Jordan. He was a low-level gambler, a man who chased losses until they turned into debts, and debts until they turned into broken bones. The message was short and terrifying. "They are outside my apartment, Jess. They said if I do not have the 200 grand by midnight, they are taking me for a ride. Please, you said the old man was loaded." I watched her reply. Her fingers were flying across the screen so fast they were a blur. "I have it. Do not worry." "Do not. I am making the transfer now. Just tell them the money is coming." She was not just stealing for handbags anymore. She was stealing to save her brother from the sharks. But she did not realize she was feeding him to a kraken. I saw the banking app open on her screen. She did not hesitate. There was no trembling in her hands this time. Desperation had replaced greed as the primary driver. She typed in the amount. $200,000. It was a staggering sum. It was enough to buy a house in some states. She entered the routing number Ricky had sent her. I sat on the edge of my bed watching the transaction on my laptop. I could have stopped it. I could have frozen the account right then. But I needed the trace. I needed to know where the money was going. On her screen, the prompt appeared. Biometric authorization required. She froze. She needed my fingerprint. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. She was coming down. It was 11:30 at night. She pushed my door open. "Dad," she whispered. I lay still, my breathing heavy and rhythmic. I was playing the sleeping old man. She crept into the room. The scent of her expensive perfume filled the small space. It smelled like gardenias and betrayal. She reached for my hand, my right hand, the hand that rested on top of the blanket. She was going to press my finger to the phone while I slept. It was a violation so intimate, so predatory, that it made my stomach turn. I let her do it. I let her take my index finger. I let her guide it to the sensor. I felt the cold glass of the screen against my skin. Buzz. Authorized. She let out a breath she had been holding for a minute. She pulled her hand back as if my skin were burning her. She backed out of the room, closing the door silently. She thought she had gotten away with it. She thought she had saved Ricky. She had no idea what she had just done. 2 minutes later, the phone in my emergency lockbox, a secure satellite phone that I kept under the floorboards, began to vibrate. A red light flashed on its chassis. This was not a notification. This was a crisis alert. I picked it up. King, I answered. It was Agent Harper. Her voice was not the casual, friendly tone of a former student. It was the razor-sharp tone of a handler in the middle of a firefight. "Sir, we have a code red on the honeypot," she said. "I know," I replied calmly. 200,000. I just watched it go. "No, sir, you do not understand." Harper interrupted. "It is not just the amount. It is the destination. We just traced the routing number she sent the funds to." I waited. I knew it was bad. I did not know how bad. "That account does not belong to a local bookie," Harper said. "That routing number is flagged in the Interpol database. It belongs to the shadowy finance arm of the Sinaloa cartel, specifically a shell company used for laundering drug money and financing trafficking operations." I closed my eyes. Ricky had not just borrowed money from loan sharks. He had borrowed money from the cartel. Jessica just wired $200,000 of what she thinks is your money directly to a known terrorist organization, Harper continued. "Sir, under the Patriot Act that makes her a financiers of terrorism. This just went from a domestic dispute to a federal security issue. We have to move." I looked at the ceiling, imagining Jessica upstairs, probably texting her brother that he was safe. She had just used a federal honeypot to pay off a drug cartel. The irony was suffocating. "What are your orders?" Sir Harper asked. "Do we raid the house? Do we take her now?" I looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. "No," I said. "Not yet, sir. If you take her now, she will claim ignorance. She will claim coercion. She will say her brother's life was in danger and she panicked. A good lawyer might get her a plea deal. We need to bury her. We need to make sure she cannot wiggle out of this." I walked to the window. The street outside was empty. "Let the payment clear," I ordered. "Let the cartel get their money. Once the transaction is finalized, she has completed the crime. Then I want you to freeze the remaining balance." "Freeze it?" Harper asked. "Yes. Lock it down. Code 99. Make it look like a federal seizure. I want her to wake up tomorrow morning thinking she is rich and then realize she cannot buy a cup of coffee. I want to see her panic. I want to see her turn on Jordan." "And the cartel?" Harper asked. "They will get their money," I said. "And then you will trace it and arrest them too. Consider Jessica your accidental informant." "Understood," Commander Harper said. "We are watching the house. We have eyes on the perimeter. You are safe." "I am not the one who is in danger." "Harper," I said before hanging up. I sat back down in the dark. The gravity of the situation settled over me. My daughter-in-law was no longer just a greedy woman. In the eyes of the law, she was now an associate of organized crime. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The file I had planted on the phone flashed in my mind. Warning, government property. She had deleted the warning. She had chosen this path. Upstairs, I heard footsteps. Jessica was walking back and forth. She was probably relieved. She was probably thinking she was the smartest woman in the world. She had saved her brother, duped the old man, and still had millions left to play with. She did not know that the invisible noose around her neck had just tightened. She did not know that outside in the unmarked van parked down the street, facial recognition cameras were already logging her movements through the window. She was already a prisoner. She just didn't know it yet. Tomorrow the cage would lock, and I would be the one holding the key. The house had been transformed into a palace of stolen decadence. It was Saturday night, and Jessica was throwing herself a birthday party that rivaled a royal coronation. The driveway was packed with luxury cars and the air smelled of expensive perfume and imported champagne. I stood in the corner of the living room holding a glass of sparkling water watching the spectacle. Caterers in white coats weaved through the crowd carrying trays of caviar and truffle oil canapes. A string quartet played softly near the fireplace. It was a beautiful scene if you ignored the fact that every single napkin, every flower petal, and every drop of alcohol had been paid for with money that was currently being tracked by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Jessica was the center of gravity. She wore a shimmering silver gown that clung to her body like liquid mercury. She laughed loudly, throwing her head back, exposing her long neck like a swan preening for an audience. She was surrounded by her friends, a circle of wealthy young women who looked at everything with judging eyes. I adjusted the cuffs of my suit. It was the one she had bought me earlier that week. I thought perhaps I was meant to be a guest. I thought that maybe, despite everything, she wanted me to be part of the family celebration. I was wrong. Earlier that afternoon, she had pulled me aside. "Dad," she had said, her voice tight and hushed. "When the guests arrive, please do not mingle too much. Just stay in the background. And if anyone asks, maybe you could help the servers clear the empty glasses. It would be a big help." I had looked at her, stunned. She wanted me to bus tables at her party, in my own house. Now, as I stood in the shadows, I understood why. I watched a group of 3 women approach Jessica. They were holding martinis and glancing in my direction. One of them, a blonde woman with enough diamonds on her fingers to sink a ship, leaned in close to Jessica. "Jessica, who is that old man over there?" the woman asked. "He has been staring at us all night. Is that Jordan's father?" I held my breath, waiting for the answer. I waited for her to say, "Yes, that is Winston. He is a retired mechanic. He raised my husband." Instead, Jessica laughed. It was a nervous, dismissive sound. "Oh, him? No. God, no. That is just Winston. He is basically the help. We keep him around because he has nowhere else to go. You know how it is. Charity case." The women cooed in sympathy. "Oh, you are such a saint, Jessica. It is so noble of you to take in a stray." My grip on the glass tightened. A stray. The help. It was not just the insult to my dignity. It was the erasure of my identity. She was ashamed of me. She was ashamed of my black skin. She was ashamed of my calloused hands. She was ashamed of the very lineage that created the husband she claimed to love. I looked around for Jordan. He was by the bar looking miserable. He had heard it too. I saw him flinch. I saw him open his mouth to say something to defend his father. But then Jessica shot him a look, a sharp warning glare, and Jordan shut his mouth. He took a long drink of whiskey and looked at the floor. That was the moment the last ember of pity I held for them died. I placed my glass on a passing tray. I straightened my tie. I was not the help. I was Special Agent Winston King. And I was about to give a toast. I walked toward the small stage where the string quartet was playing. I moved with a purpose that parted the crowd. People stepped aside, confused by the sudden authority radiating from the old man in the corner. I stepped up onto the platform. I nodded to the cellist, signaling him to stop. The music died down. The room fell into an awkward silence. I reached for the microphone. It gave a high-pitched feedback whine before settling. Jessica turned around. Her face went pale. Her eyes widened in horror. She started walking toward me, waving her hand in a cutting motion. "Stop it. Get down." I ignored her. I looked out at the sea of faces, the wealthy, the privileged, the oblivious. "Good evening, everyone," I said. My voice was deep and steady, booming through the speakers. It did not sound like the voice of a confused old man. It sounded like a commander addressing his troops. "For those of you who do not know me, my name is Winston. And according to our hostess, I am the charity case who lives in the guest room." A few nervous titters rippled through the crowd. Jessica froze halfway to the stage. She forced a smile, terrified of what I might say next. I just wanted to take a moment to congratulate my daughter-in-law. I continued, my eyes locking onto hers. It is truly impressive what she has accomplished. To gather all of you here tonight, to provide such an exquisite feast, to live a life of such grandeur. Jessica relaxed slightly. She thought I was complimenting her. She thought I was playing along, but I continued, my voice dropping an octave darker and colder. But I have learned a very important lesson in my 71 years. A lesson I think is important to share on a night like this. We often think that the best things in life are the ones we take without asking, the shortcuts, the easy wins. I saw Jordan stiffen by the bar. He knew. "But let me give you a piece of advice," I said, leaning into the microphone. "Enjoy the champagne. Enjoy the caviar. Enjoy the beautiful gowns. But remember this. The things that seem free are usually the ones that have the highest cost. And when the bill finally comes due, it is never just about money. It is about your soul." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. The guests looked at each other, confused by the ominous tone. Jessica snapped. She rushed the stage, her heels clicking furiously on the hardwood. She grabbed the microphone from my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "Okay," she shrieked, her voice shrill and trembling. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for that colorful speech." She turned to the crowd, laughing maniacally. "He is a little confused sometimes. You know how it is with age. The medication mixes with the sparkling water." She turned to me, her back to the guests. Her face was a mask of pure venom. "Get to your room," she hissed. "Get out of my sight right now, you senile old fool. You ruined everything." I looked at her. I did not look away. I did not apologize. "Happy birthday, Jessica," I said softly. "I hope it was worth it." I stepped down from the stage. I walked through the crowd. This time they did not look at me with pity. They looked at me with unease. They sensed something was wrong. They sensed a shift in the atmosphere. As I walked past Jordan, he grabbed my arm. His hand was shaking. "Dad," he whispered. "Why did you say that?" I pulled my arm away gently. "Because someone had to tell her the truth, son, even if she is too deaf to hear it." I walked out of the living room and down the hallway to my bedroom. Behind me, the music started up again, but the energy was gone. The party was tainted. I closed my door and locked it. I sat on my bed and exhaled. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Agent Harper. "Sir, we picked up the audio from the wiretap." That was quite a speech. I typed back slowly. "Did the transfer clear?" "Yes, sir. The funds are in the cartel account. The trap is sealed." I put the phone down. Jessica was upstairs trying to salvage her party. She was drinking more, trying to laugh louder, trying to drown out the echo of my words. She thought she had won. She thought she had silenced me. She did not know that the waiters catering her party were undercover agents photographing every guest. She did not know that the valet parking the cars was logging license plates. And she certainly did not know that the bill I spoke of was already printed and the price was 15 years in a federal penitentiary. I took off my suit jacket and hung it up carefully. I would need it for court. "Sleep well, Jessica," I whispered to the ceiling, "because this is the last peaceful night you will ever have." The party ended, not with a bang, but with the slamming of car doors as the last guests fled the awkward tension. The house fell into a silence that was heavier than the noise had been. I was in my room taking off my tie when the door flew open. It hit the wall with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Jessica stood there. She had stripped off the facade of the loving daughter-in-law along with her silver gown. She was wearing a silk robe now, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the raw, ugly determination underneath. Jordan stood behind her, looking like a ghost in his own home. He held a stack of papers in his hands. His knuckles were white. I turned slowly. I did not pretend to be surprised. I had been expecting this since the moment I walked off that stage. "What can I do for you, Jessica?" I asked, my voice calm and level. She did not answer immediately. She walked into the room, pacing like a tiger in a cage. She looked at my small bed. She looked at the picture of my late wife. She looked at everything with a sneer of absolute contempt. "We need to talk about your living arrangements, Dad," she said. Her voice was not shrill anymore. It was cold. It was the voice of a business transaction. I looked at Jordan. He would not meet my eyes. He was staring at the floor, studying the pattern of the wood grain as if his life depended on it. "Living arrangements," I repeated. "I thought I was living here, with my family." Jessica laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Family," she mocked. "Do you think family embarrasses each other in front of the entire social elite? Do you think family threatens their children with cryptic speeches about prices and souls? No, Dad. That is not family. That is a liability. And we are done with liabilities." She snapped her fingers at Jordan. "Give them to him." Jordan stepped forward. His hands were shaking so badly the papers rattled. He held them out to me. I took them. I did not need my reading glasses to know what they were. I had seen forms like this before. Power of attorney, asset transfer authorization, and the pièce de résistance, a permanent admission form for the Shady Pines Assisted Living Facility. It was a state-run warehouse for the forgotten elderly, a place where people went to wait for death in rooms that smelled of bleach and despair. "This is for your own good," Dad Jordan whispered. His voice was so thin it almost broke. We think you need professional care. You are getting confused. The speech tonight, it proved it. You are not yourself." I looked at my son. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was not afraid for me. He was afraid of her. "And my assets?" I asked, tapping the transfer form. "You want control of the accounts too?" Jessica stepped forward. She was so close I could smell the alcohol on her breath. "Someone has to manage them," she said. "You are clearly not capable. Look at you. You hide in this room. You hoard money while your family struggles. It is sick. We are doing you a favor. We will take the burden off your shoulders." I placed the papers on the desk. I smoothed them out with my hand, my scarred hand. I looked at Jessica. I looked deep into her eyes, searching for a single spark of humanity, a single hesitation. "Are you sure you want to go down this road, Jessica?" I asked softly. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me the dramatic agent talk. Just sign the papers, old man. I am asking you a serious question." I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. "Once I sign these, there is no going back. This is a binding contract, but not the kind you think it is. If you force my hand now, you are sealing your own fate. Walk away, Jessica. Tear these up. Let us go back to being a family. This is your last chance." She leaned in close. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure greed. "My last chance," she hissed. "No, this is your last chance. Sign the papers, or I swear to God you will never see your grandchildren again. I will make sure Jordan cuts you off completely. You will die alone in a gutter, and no one will even come to identify the body." She had played her ace. The grandchildren. The two little boys sleeping upstairs who I loved more than life itself. She was using them as leverage. She was holding my love for them hostage in exchange for a bank account that didn't even belong to me. That was it. The last thread of hesitation snapped. I looked at Jordan. He was crying silently. Tears were streaming down his face, but he did not move to stop her. He was broken, and she was the one holding the hammer. "Fine," I said. "You win." Jessica let out a breath of triumph. She pulled a pen from her pocket and slammed it down on the desk. "Sign it," she ordered. "Right now." I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at the signature line. Winston King. That was the name of the man who fixed cars. That was the name of the man who raised a son. That was the name of the victim. But I was not signing as a victim. I brought the pen to the paper. I did not sign my name. In a flowing script that looked elegant to the untrained eye, I wrote something else. I wrote the designation that I had carried for 40 years in the shadows. The code that authorized lethal force. The code that activated federal dragnets. Agent WK-71 Omega. I signed it on the power of attorney. I signed it on the asset transfer. I signed it on the admission form for the nursing home. Jessica did not even look at what I wrote. She snatched the papers away the moment the pen lifted from the page. She was too blinded by the victory. She saw ink on the line, and that was all that mattered. "Done," she exclaimed, clutching the papers to her chest like a winning lottery ticket. "Finally." She looked at me with a smirk. "Pack your bags, Dad," she said. "The van comes for you at 8 a.m. tomorrow. I want this room cleared out so I can turn it into a yoga studio." She turned on her heel and marched out of the room. Jordan lingered for a second. He looked at me with an expression of agony. "I am sorry, Dad," he mouthed. Then he turned and followed his wife. I stood alone in the room. The door was open. I walked over to the desk and picked up the pen she had left behind. I twirled it in my fingers. She thought she had just signed a deal for millions of dollars. She did not know that by accepting a document signed with an active federal agent code under duress, she had just committed a felony against an officer of the United States government. In the eyes of the law, those papers were not a transfer of assets. They were a confession. They were physical proof of extortion. I walked to the window and looked out at the night. The moon was full. "Enjoy your yoga studio, Jessica," I whispered. "The cells in federal prison are only 6 by 8 feet. You're going to have a hard time doing a downward dog in there." I went to my closet and pulled out my suitcase. I did not pack my cardigans. I did not pack my slippers. I packed my tactical gear. I packed my badge. I packed the suit I would wear to her arraignment. The game was over. She had called my bluff, and I had folded. But she forgot that in poker you do not show your hand until the river card is dealt. And the river was coming. It was coming with a badge and a warrant. I lay down on the bed for the last time. I did not sleep. I waited for the sun to rise. I waited for the justice that was coming with the dawn. The ink on the power of attorney forms was barely dry when Jessica made her move. She did not wait for the van to pick me up. She did not wait to pack my bags. She waited exactly 45 minutes after leaving my room before she drove to the downtown branch of First National Bank. I was not there, but I did not need to be. Through the remote access on my laptop, I had a front row seat to her destruction. I sat in a small diner down the street from the house eating a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon. My phone was on the table next to the pepper shaker. On the screen, a live audio feed from the bug I had planted in her purse transmitted every sound. I heard the heavy glass doors of the bank slide open. I heard the click of her heels on the marble floor. They were fast, aggressive steps. The steps of a woman who believes she has just inherited the world. I heard her approach the counter. "I need to make a withdrawal," she announced. Her voice was loud, echoing in the quiet lobby. "A full withdrawal, everything in the account ending in 8892. There was a pause. I could hear the teller typing. "Do you have the authorization for this account, ma'am?" The teller asked, his voice polite but hesitant. "This account is under the name of Winston King." Jessica laughed. It was that same sharp, dismissive laugh she used when she talked about my old clothes. "I have power of attorney," she said. I heard the rustle of papers as she slammed the documents onto the counter. "Signed and notarized, I am taking over the management of his assets. He is incapacitated." I took a sip of my coffee. Incapacitated. That was the word she used to describe the man who was currently listening to her heartbeat rise. "One moment, please, ma'am," the teller said. I heard more typing. Then silence. A long, heavy silence. Then I heard a sound that was music to my ears. It was the sound of a supervisor being called over. "Is there a problem?" Jessica demanded. Her voice was rising an octave. "Why is it taking so long? I have an appointment to get to." "Ma'am," the supervisor said, his voice grave. "Please lower your voice." I looked at my laptop screen. I had the bank's internal alert system mirrored. I saw exactly what they were seeing. On the teller's monitor, the screen had turned a bright flashing red. Across the center in bold capital letters was a message that would make any banker's blood run cold. "Federal freeze. Code 99. Do not discuss. Detain if possible. Contact FBI field office immediately." Code 99 was not just a freeze. It was a designation reserved for accounts linked to terrorism, espionage, or high-level treason. It meant that the money inside did not just disappear. It meant the person trying to access it was now a person of interest in a national security investigation. "What is going on?" Jessica screamed. "Why are you looking at me like that? Give me my money." "Ma'am, I cannot access this account," the supervisor said. His voice was shaking. "The system has locked it. You need to step aside." "Locked it?" Jessica screeched. "What do you mean locked it? It has $4 million in it. I saw it yesterday. Unlock it right now or I will sue this entire bank into the ground." She was making a scene. She was attracting attention, exactly as I had planned. "Ma'am, we cannot help you," the supervisor said firmly. "Please leave the premises before we call security." Jessica let out a sound of pure rage. She snatched the papers off the counter. "Useless," she yelled. "You are all useless. I will handle this myself." I heard her heels storming out of the bank. I heard the car door slam, then silence for 10 seconds. My phone on the diner table began to ring. The caller ID showed Jessica. I let it ring 3 times. I took another bite of bacon. I wiped my mouth with a napkin. Then I picked up. "Hello," I answered. My voice was groggy as if I had just woken up from a nap. "Dad," Jessica screamed. The audio spiked so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "What did you do? What did you do to the account?" I blinked, feigning confusion. "Jessica." "Why are you shouting? I am trying to rest. You said I had to pack today." "Don't play dumb with me," she hissed. "I am at the bank. The account is frozen. It says federal freeze. What did you do, old man? Did you change the password? Did you call them? Unlock it. Unlock it right now, or so help me God, I will drive this car off a bridge." I paused. I let the silence stretch out until it was uncomfortable. "Account," I repeated slowly. "Jessica, what account are you talking about?" "The account," she shrieked. The $4 million, the settlement, the one on your phone. I let out a low, confused chuckle. Jessica, I said, my voice dripping with pity. Honey, are you feeling all right? $4 million. I have never had $4 million in my life. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. What she whispered. I have my pension, I continued. It is about $400 a month. And I have that old savings account with maybe $2,000 for my funeral. But millions. Jessica, I think you are working too hard. You are imagining things. No, she screamed. Her voice was breaking now, cracking under the weight of panic. No, I saw it. I saw it on your phone. I have screenshots. I transferred money from it. I transferred $200,000 to Ricky. It was real. I sighed, a long, sad sigh of a father worried about his child's mental health. Jessica, listen to me very carefully, I said. I think the stress is getting to you. There is no money. There never was. Maybe you downloaded a game, or maybe you were dreaming. But you need to calm down. If you transferred money to Ricky, you must have used your own savings. My savings, she gasped. I don't have savings. Then I don't know what to tell you, I said. But Jessica, you sound unstable. Maybe Jordan is right. Maybe we all need help. But talking about millions of dollars that don't exist, that sounds like a delusion. Liar, she sobbed. You are lying. I know what I saw. Did you, I asked, or did you see what you wanted to see? Greed can do strange things to the mind, Jessica. It can make us see castles where there are only ruins. She was hyperventilating now. I could hear her gasping for air. The reality was crashing down on her. The debt to the cartel, the promise of the Porsche, the Hermes bag. It was all based on a ghost. And now the ghost had vanished, leaving her holding the bill. Fix this, she pleaded. Her voice was small now, like a child's. Dad, please. If that money isn't real, Ricky is dead. I am dead. Please tell me it is real. I leaned back in the booth. I watched the steam rise from my coffee. I am sorry, Jessica, I said coldly. I cannot fix a problem that exists only in your head. I suggest you go home. I suggest you talk to Jordan. And Jessica, what she whimpered. Be careful driving, I said. I hear the police are out in force today. I hung up the phone. I placed it face down on the table. She was not just broke. She was now questioning her own sanity. I had not just taken her future, I had taken her grip on reality. I signaled the waitress for the check. The first domino had fallen. The cartel would be looking for their money. The FBI was looking for a terrorist financier. And Jessica was sitting in her car, realizing that the only thing she had actually stolen was her own death sentence. I paid for my breakfast with cash. Real cash. It was time to go back to the house. The finale was approaching, and I did not want to miss the look on her face when the police arrived. Not for the money, but for the Mirror app. Because the only thing better than catching a criminal is watching them realize they caught themselves. The disintegration of Jessica's life happened with the velocity of a car crash. It started the moment she returned from the bank, her face a mask of smeared mascara and terror. She had barely stepped through the front door when the second blow landed. It came in the form of a flatbed tow truck backing into the driveway, its reverse beeper cutting through the afternoon silence like a countdown. I was sitting in the living room by the window reading a book. I did not look up, but I saw everything in my peripheral vision. The driver, a burly man in a neon vest, hopped out and began hooking chains to the bumper of the brand-new Porsche Macan that Jessica had parked there only yesterday. It was the car she had put a deposit on using the credit card linked to our now frozen assets. Jessica heard the sound. She sprinted out the front door screaming, "Hey, what are you doing? Get away from my car!" She ran down the driveway, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. She grabbed the driver's arm. "You can't take this. I paid the deposit. I have the receipt." The driver didn't even look at her. He brushed her hand off like she was a fly. "Card got declined, lady," he said, his voice bored. "Dealership called it in. Fraud alert. They said the funding source was flagged by the feds. I'm just doing my job." "Fraud," she shrieked. "It's not fraud. It's a mistake. My father-in-law, he messed up the accounts. Put it down." She was hysterical now, clawing at the door handle of the car as it was lifted into the air. It was a pathetic sight. The neighbors were watching from their windows. The curtains twitched. Jessica, who prided herself on being the queen of the cul-de-sac, was now the neighborhood entertainment. The driver ignored her. He pulled the lever and the Porsche rose higher, tilting backward like a dying beast. He climbed into his cab and drove off, leaving Jessica standing in the empty spot where her status symbol used to be. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the oil stain on the concrete. Then her phone rang. I saw her shoulders stiffen. It wasn't a ringtone I recognized. It was a harsh, jarring buzz. She pulled the phone from her pocket slowly as if it were a bomb. I could see her face through the window. All the color drained from her skin. It was Ricky. Or rather, the people who owned Ricky now. The transfer she had made the night before the $200,000 to the cartel front had been flagged. Code 99 meant the money didn't just bounce back to the sender. It was held in escrow by the government. The cartel hadn't received their payment. And people like that do not care about banking errors. They care about results. I couldn't hear what was said on the other end of the line, but I heard Jessica's response. "No, please, listen to me. The money was sent. It's the bank. They froze it. I swear I have it. Just give me 24 hours. Please don't hurt him. He's my brother." She listened for another second, then the phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the driveway. She fell to her knees, sobbing. It was a primal sound, a mixture of grief and absolute terror. She wasn't crying for the car anymore. She was crying because she realized she had just paid for her brother's execution with a check that bounced. She stayed there for 5 minutes. Then a switch flipped. She stood up. Her face changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a manic, desperate rage. She looked at the house. She looked at the window where I was sitting. She stormed inside. She didn't even look at me as she passed through the living room. She marched straight to the hallway that led to my bedroom. I closed my book and followed her. I moved quietly like a shadow. When I reached the doorway of my room, the destruction had already begun. Jessica was like a tornado. She had pulled every drawer out of my dresser and dumped the contents on the floor. My shirts, my socks, my old uniforms were scattered everywhere. She was kicking through them, looking for something. Anything. "Where is it?" she screamed, grabbing a shoebox from the top shelf of the closet and shaking it upside down. "Where is the real bank book? Where are the gold bars? I know you have them. You are an agent. You people always have a stash." She was delusional. She had constructed a fantasy where I was a secret millionaire hoarding physical wealth, and if she could just find it, she could pay off the cartel and save her skin. She ripped the mattress off the bed frame. She tore the lining of my suitcase. "Jessica," I said, calm IL leaning against the door frame. "Stop this." She spun around. Her hair was wild, her eyes bloodshot. She looked deranged. "Give it to me," she screamed, lunging at me but stopping just short. "Give me the access codes. Give me the cash. I know you have it hidden here. You are letting them kill Ricky. You are doing this on purpose." I looked at her. I didn't blink. "I am doing nothing. Jessica," I said. "You are the one who logged into a federal system. You are the one who tried to wire money to a drug lord. I am just the old man who lives in the guest room. Remember, liar," she shrieked. She turned back to the room, desperate to find something to hurt me with. Her eyes landed on the small table in the corner. On it sat my turntable and my collection of vinyl records. It was my sanctuary. Original pressings of Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk. Albums I had collected over 40 years of traveling the world. They were not just plastic, they were memories. And next to them in a silver frame was the last photo taken of my wife Betty before she passed. She was laughing in the photo, the wind blowing her hair. Jessica walked over to the table. She picked up the photo. "Is this what you care about?" she spat, holding the frame up. "This dead woman? Does she know you are a monster?" "Don't," I warned. My voice dropped to a whisper, but it was a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "Put it down, Jessica." She smiled. It was a broken, ugly smile. "Make the transfer," she said. "Unlock the account, or I swear to God I will erase every memory you have left." I stood still. I could have stopped her. I could have crossed the room in 2 seconds and immobilized her. I knew 6 different ways to disarm an attacker before they could blink, but I did not move. Because in order for Jordan to see her true face, in order for the judge to see her true nature, she had to cross this line. She had to show the world that there was no bottom to her cruelty. "I do not have the money, Jessica," I said. She screamed, a sound of pure frustration. She threw the frame against the wall, the glass shattered, the silver frame bent. The photo of Betty fell face down into the pile of dirty laundry on the floor. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a physical ache, but my face remained stone. She wasn't done. She grabbed the record that was on the turntable. It was Kinda Blue, my favorite. She looked at me, challenging me. Then she snapped it over her knee. The black vinyl shattered with a loud crack that sounded like a bone breaking. She threw the pieces at my feet. Then she grabbed another. And another. She was destroying history. She was destroying art. She was destroying the only things I had left of the man I used to be before the job took everything else. I walked over to the armchair in the corner of the room, the only piece of furniture she hadn't overturned yet. I sat down. I crossed my legs. I brushed a piece of lint off my trousers. I watched her panting, standing amidst the ruins of my life. She was sweating, trembling, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to yell to hit her to give her the money. Instead, I looked at her with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. "Are you finished?" I asked. She stared at me, her chest heaving. "Why aren't you fighting back?" she screamed. "Why aren't you angry?" "Because anger is for people who have something to lose." "Jessica," I said softly. "And I have already lost everything that mattered in this room." I pointed to the shattered record at my feet. "You think you are hurting me?" I continued. "But you are not. You are digging. You are digging a hole so deep that not even a rope can reach you." She kicked a pile of clothes. "Shut up. Just shut up." I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees. I looked her dead in the eye. "What are you looking for, really?" I asked. "Are you looking for a bank card, or are you looking for the evidence of your own crime?" She froze. "What?" she whispered. "You think if you find the money, the crime goes away," I said. "You think if you pay the bad men, the police won't notice. But Jessica, you left fingerprints. Not on this room, on the server, on the network." I stood up slowly and walked over to the broken photo of Betty. I crouched down and picked it up. I brushed the glass off her smiling face. I placed the photo carefully in my pocket. "You are acting like a rat in a cage," I said, my voice low and devoid of emotion. "Running in circles, biting the bars, eating your own young. But the cage isn't locked, Jessica. The door is open. You just don't know how to walk out because you are too busy looking for the cheese." She stepped back. She looked terrified. For the first time, she wasn't looking at an old man. She was looking at something she couldn't understand. She was looking at a mirror reflecting her own ugliness. "You are crazy," she muttered, backing toward the door. "You are sick." She turned and ran. She ran out of the room, down the hall, and out the front door. I heard her car, the old sedan she hated, start up and peel away. She was running, but there was nowhere to go. I stood alone in the wreckage of my room. The air was thick with dust and the smell of aggression. I looked at the broken records. I looked at the torn clothes. "It is done," I whispered. I reached under the floorboard, which she had miraculously missed in her frenzy, and pulled out the secure phone. I dialed Harper. "Status?" I asked. "We saw the tow truck," Harper said. "And we have audio of the destruction." "Sir, did she destroy the photos?" "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice tight. "Is the perimeter secure?" "Yes, sir. She is heading north. We have a tail on her." "Where is she going?" "She's going to try to find money," I said. "She is going to try to pawn her jewelry. She's going to try to rob a convenience store. She is desperate. She is dangerous." I paused. "Harper." "Yes, sir. When you take her down, be gentle." Sir Harper sounded surprised. "After what she just did?" "Be gentle," I repeated. "Not for her sake, but because my son is going to be watching, and I need him to see that we are the good guys. I need him to see the difference between justice and vengeance." "Understood, sir." I hung up. I sat back down in the armchair amidst the chaos. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence. In my head, I played the first track of Kind of Blue. I played it note for note, remembering the sound of the trumpet, remembering the way Betty used to hum along. She could break the record, but she couldn't break the music. The storm was outside now, and I was the eye. I waited for the final thunderclap. It would happen tomorrow. And when it did, the world would know the truth about Jessica Thorne, and Winston King would finally rest. The house was vibrating with the aftershocks of Jessica's rage. She had returned from her failed escape attempt, realizing that she had nowhere to go. Her credit cards were dead. Her car was gone. Her brother was a marked man. And in her twisted mind, there was only one person to blame for the collapse of her empire: me. I stood in the doorway of my ravaged bedroom, leaning on my cane. I watched them in the living room. Jordan was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, looking like a man waiting for a bomb to go off. Jessica was pacing back and forth in front of him. She was no longer the poised socialite. She looked feral. Her hair was matted with sweat, and her eyes were darting around the room as if searching for an exit that did not exist. "Get him out!" she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Get him out of this house, Jordan, right now!" Jordan looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. "Jessica, please. It is dark outside. He has nowhere to go. Can we just wait until morning?" "No!" Jessica screamed. Her voice cracked, breaking into a sound that was half shriek, half sob. "No more waiting. Every second he is here, he is poisoning us. He is the reason the accounts are frozen. He is the reason the car was taken. He is a curse, Jordan. Look at him, standing there judging us. I want him gone." She marched over to Jordan and grabbed him by the lapels of his shirt, hauling him to his feet. "Do you hear me?" she yelled into his face. "Throw him out! Or are you too much of a coward to protect your own wife?" I watched my son. I watched the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had taught to tie a tie. I waited for him to push her away. I waited for him to say that enough was enough. I waited for him to tell her that you do not kick an old man out into the street just because you got caught stealing. But he did not push her away. He slumped in her grip. "Jessica," he whispered pleadingly. "He is my dad." That was the wrong thing to say. The sound of the slap echoed through the vaulted ceiling of the living room. It was a wet, brutal sound. Jessica struck him across the face with all the force of her desperation. Jordan stumbled back, holding his cheek, looking at her in shock. "Don't you dare," she spat at him. "Don't you dare talk to me about family. That man is not family. He is a leech. He is a liability." And look at him, Jordan. Look at him. He is a useless old black man who has dragged down our social standing since the day he moved in. The slur hung in the air. It was not the N-word, but the way she said black man carried the same weight. It carried years of hidden resentment, years of her smiling at my face while wishing I would disappear so she wouldn't have to explain my presence to her country club friends. I saw Jordan flinch. He looked at me, then back at her. "If he is not out of this house in 5 minutes," Jessica said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "I am leaving. And if I leave Jordan, I am taking everything. I will file for divorce. I will tell the court you were complicit in the fraud. I will make sure you never see a dime. You will be homeless just like him. Is that what you want?" Jordan looked at her. He saw the end of his life as he knew it. He saw the end of the illusion he had built. He was a weak man, terrified of being alone, terrified of losing the status she provided, even if that status was built on debt and lies. He turned slowly to face me. I stood tall. I did not lean on the cane anymore. I looked him in the eye. This was the test. The final test. I did not say a word. I just watched him. He took a step toward me, then another. He looked like he was walking through waist-deep water. "Dad," he croaked. I nodded slowly. I knew what was coming. I could see the decision forming behind his eyes. It was the decision of a drowning man climbing on top of another survivor to keep his head above water. "Do what you have to do, son," I said softly. "Do what you think is right." I gave him the permission not because I wanted to leave, but because I needed him to own his choice. I needed him to say the words so that later when the dust settled he could never claim he was forced. He had to pull the trigger himself. Jordan closed his eyes. Tears leaked out and ran down his face, mixing with the red mark on his cheek where she had slapped him. "I can't lose her, Dad," he whispered. She is all I have." I looked at him with a profound sadness. He thought she was all he had. He did not realize that by choosing her, he was losing himself. "Please go," he said. His voice was barely audible. "Please, just leave." Behind him, Jessica let out a breath of triumph. She crossed her arms and smirked. She had won. She had broken the bond between father and son and established her absolute dominance. I looked at Jordan one last time. "I am sorry you feel that way," I said. I did not argue. I did not beg. I did not ask for 5 more minutes to pack. I turned around and walked back into my room. I reached under the bed and pulled out the suitcase. It was already packed. It had been packed for 2 days. I had known this moment would come. I had known that when the pressure applied by the FBI operation became too great, the weak links would snap. And Jordan was the weakest link of all. I picked up the suitcase. It was light. It contained my tactical gear, my badge, and the few photos of Betty I had managed to salvage before Jessica's rampage. I walked back out into the living room. Jordan was staring at the floor, sobbing quietly. Jessica was standing by the door, holding it open, her face twisted into a mask of impatient victory. "Get out," she sneered as I approached. "And don't come back. If I see you on this property again, I will call the police for trespassing." I stopped in front of her. I looked at her, really looked at her. "You do not have to worry about the police, Jessica," I said, my voice calm and steady. "They are already on their way." Her smirk faltered for a second. "What?" But I did not explain. I stepped past her out into the cool night air. The door slammed shut behind me. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I heard the chain lock rattle into place. I stood on the porch of the house I had paid for, the house I had allowed them to live in. I was an old man with a suitcase standing in the dark. But I was not alone. As I walked down the driveway, the headlights of a black van parked down the street flicked on. I walked toward it. My stride lengthened. The limp vanished. The tremor in my hands disappeared. The side door of the van slid open. Agent Harper was sitting inside, surrounded by monitors. On the screens, I could see the interior of the living room I had just left. I could see Jessica pouring herself a drink. I could see Jordan collapsing onto the rug. Commander King Harper said, offering me a hand, "We have everything. The slap, the threat, the eviction. It is all recorded." I climbed into the van and sat down. I looked at the screen. "Is the team ready?" I asked. "Yes," Sir Harper replied. "SWAT is holding at the perimeter. We are just waiting for your order." I looked at the monitor one last time. I watched my son crawling toward his wife, begging for forgiveness, begging for a scrap of affection from the woman who had just destroyed his soul. I felt a heavy stone settle in my chest. I had saved him from prison, perhaps, but I could not save him from his own weakness. "Give them 10 minutes, I said. 10 minutes, sir." "Yes," I said, leaning back and closing my eyes. "Let them have 10 minutes to think they won. Let them toast to their victory." I took a deep breath. "Then bring the hammer down." The night air was biting against my skin as I walked down the driveway. I could feel the gravel crunching under my dress shoes, a sound that marked the rhythm of my departure. Behind me, the house was a glowing beacon of warmth and betrayal. I did not look back. I did not need to see my son weeping on the floor or his wife standing over him like a conqueror. I had seen enough. I reached the end of the driveway just as the black van pulled up to the curb. It did not park like a normal vehicle. It swerved in, aggressively blocking the exit, its tires screeching slightly against the asphalt. It was a Mercedes Sprinter, completely blacked out with no license plates and reinforced bumpers. To the untrained eye, it looked like a delivery vehicle. To me, it looked like a hammer waiting to fall. I stopped. I set my suitcase down on the pavement. I adjusted my coat. From the porch, Jessica's voice cut through the darkness. She had followed me out, unable to resist one final gloat. She stood under the yellow porch light, her arms crossed, a glass of wine in her hand. She saw the van. She saw the tinted windows. And she laughed. It was a cruel, vindictive sound that echoed in the quiet neighborhood. "Well, look at that!" she shouted, pointing her wine glass at the vehicle. "It looks like your luck finally ran out, old man. Did the nursing home send a special transport for difficult patients? Or maybe the bank called the police on you for fraud?" She took a sip of wine, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Go ahead, officers," she yelled at the van. "Take him. He is right there. He is a liar and a thief. Get him out of my neighborhood." She thought she was commanding the scene. She thought she was the righteous homeowner pointing out the criminal. She had no idea that she was standing in the kill box. The side door of the van slid open with a heavy mechanical thud. Jessica was still smiling. She expected to see a couple of bored patrol officers or maybe some orderlies in white coats. Instead, the night exploded with light and sound. Floodlights mounted on the roof of the van blinded the entire front yard. The white beams cut through the darkness, illuminating the house like a prison yard during a breakout. "Move, move, move." The command tore through the air. 6 figures poured out of the van. They were not wearing nursing home scrubs. They were clad in full tactical gear. Heavy body armor, Kevlar helmets, combat boots. On their chests, bold yellow letters spelled out 4 letters that stopped the heart of any criminal. FBI. Jessica's smile froze. She lowered her glass, squinting into the blinding lights. Finally, she screamed, still clinging to her delusion. Arrest him. He is right there. He tried to steal my money, but the agents did not turn toward me. They rushed past me. They flowed around me like water around a stone. They were moving in a tactical formation, weapons raised, moving straight up the driveway toward the house, toward her. Jessica took a step back, confusion finally cracking her mask of arrogance. "Wait," she stammered. "What are you doing? He is down there. Why are you coming up here?" Then she saw it. It started as a single red dot on the white silk of her robe right over her heart. Then another appeared on her forehead, then another on her stomach. Within seconds, she was painted with a constellation of laser sights. She looked down at her chest. She saw the red dots dancing. She looked up, and for the first time, she looked down the barrel of an assault rifle. "Get down!" an agent roared. "Hands where we can see them. Get on the ground!" Now Jessica dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the porch, spraying red liquid across her feet like blood. "Me!" she shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch of pure terror. No, you have the wrong person. I am the victim. He is the one." She pointed a trembling finger at me standing calmly by the street. "Get on the ground," the agent repeated, advancing up the stairs. I stood by the van watching. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out. She was not wearing tactical gear. She was wearing a sharp black suit, a crisp white shirt, and dark sunglasses even though it was night. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator. It was Special Agent Harper, my former student, my right hand. She walked past me. She did not stop, but as she passed, she gave a barely perceptible nod. "Commander," she whispered. She walked up the driveway, her heels clicking on the concrete with the authority of a judge's gavel. She walked right past the SWAT team, right up to the porch where Jessica was now cowering against the doorframe, sobbing. "Who are you?" Jessica cried. "What is happening?" Harper stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She removed her sunglasses, slowly revealing eyes that were cold and hard as steel. She pulled a badge from her jacket pocket and held it up. The gold shield caught the reflection of the tactical lights. "Jessica Thorne?" Harper asked. Her voice was calm, professional, and utterly terrifying. "Yes," Jessica whimpered. But I didn't do anything." Agent Harper did not argue. She did not explain. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out a warrant. "Jessica Thorne, you are under arrest," Harper announced, her voice projecting clearly so that Jordan, cowering inside the house, could hear every word. "Arrest." Jessica gasped. "For what I called the bank, I reported the fraud. You are under arrest for violation of Title 18 United States Code, Section 1030. Harper recited, listing the statutes from memory. "Unauthorized access to a protected federal computer system." Jessica shook her head violently. "No, it was just an app. It was just a phone. You are also charged with wire fraud," Harper continued relentlessly. "And most significantly, violation of the Patriot Act Section 319. Money laundering and providing material financial support to a known international terrorist organization." "Terrorist!" Jessica screamed. "It was my brother." It was Ricky. Harper signaled the agents. 2 of them moved forward, grabbing Jessica's arms. They spun her around. "Ricky is currently in custody in Miami," Harper said coldly. "And the account you wired $200,000 to belongs to the Sinaloa cartel. Congratulations, Mrs. Thorne. You just funded a drug war." Jessica's knees buckled. She went limp in the agent's grip. "No," she wailed. "No, please, it was a mistake. I didn't know, Dad. Dad, tell them." She looked past the agent, searching for me in the darkness. "Dad, help me, tell them it was your money. Tell them you gave it to me. Please, I don't want to go to jail." I stood by the van, silent. I watched as they slapped the handcuffs on her wrists. The metallic click was loud and final. Jordan appeared in the doorway then. He looked at the laser sights, the SWAT team, his wife in cuffs. He looked at Harper. And then he looked at me. He realized everything. The warning about the government property, the refusal to give the money, the signature I had used on the papers. He looked at me with horror and awe. His father wasn't a senile mechanic. His father was the hammer that had just fallen. Agent Harper turned to the team. Secure the premises. Seize all electronic devices. I want every laptop, every phone, every tablet bagged and tagged. She turned back to Jessica, who was now being dragged down the stairs, her feet dragging through the spilled wine and broken glass. You have the right to remain silent, Harper said, and I suggest you use it, because you have already said enough to put you away for 20 years. They dragged her past me. She looked at me. Her face was a ruin of tears and snot. Why, she whispered as they passed. Why didn't you stop me? I looked at her. I picked up my suitcase. I tried, Jessica, I said softly. I left you a warning. I told you the price was high. You just didn't think I could afford the bill. The agents shoved her into the back of a patrol car. She screamed as the door slammed shut, cutting off her voice. The silence returned to the neighborhood, broken only by the crackle of police radios. Harper walked back down the driveway to where I was standing. She looked at the house, then at me. We have the brother, sir, she said quietly. And the cartel account is frozen. The operation is a complete success. I looked at the house. I saw Jordan standing in the doorway alone. Not complete, I said. Not yet. I looked at the patrol car where Jessica was thrashing against the window. Take her to the federal holding facility downtown. Do not let her call a lawyer until morning. Let her sit in a cell for 12 hours and think about what she did. Yes, sir. And you. I looked at my watch. I have a new life to start, I said. But first I have one last thing to say to my son. I walked back up the driveway. The SWAT team parted to let me through. I was not the old man anymore. I was Commander King, and I was walking into the ruins of my home to say goodbye. The chaos on the front lawn reached a fever pitch. Jessica was not going quietly. As the reality of the handcuffs bit into her wrists, she began to thrash with the desperate energy of a trapped animal. She dug her expensive heels into the asphalt of the driveway, kicking and screaming, making a spectacle that would be talked about in this neighborhood for decades. "You are making a mistake," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain. "Look at him. Look at that old man standing there. He is the one you want. He is the fraudster. That account is his. He set me up. He is senile. He is crazy. He has millions of dollars hidden in offshore accounts. Why aren't you arresting him?" The agents holding her did not flinch. They dragged her backward toward the patrol car, their faces impassive behind their tactical visors. But Jessica would not stop. She twisted her body around, screaming directly at Agent Harper. "Ask him. Just ask him where the money came from. He is a retired mechanic." "A mechanic? How does a mechanic have $4 million? He stole it. He is the criminal mastermind. I am just a victim. I am a victim of elder abuse. He tricked me." Agent Harper raised a hand. "Hold her," Harper ordered. The two agents stopped. They held Jessica firmly in place about 10 feet away from where I was standing. Jessica was panting heavily, her chest heaving, her mascara running down her face in dark rivulets. She looked at Harper with a spark of hope, thinking she had finally broken through, thinking her lies were working. "See?" she gasped. "You see it, don't you? It doesn't make sense. He is nobody. He is just a useless old man we let live in our house out of charity. He is the criminal. Arrest him." Harper stood in the silence that followed. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree I had planted when Jordan was born. The tactical lights from the van hummed with electric tension. Harper looked at Jessica. She took off her sunglasses, slowly folding them and placing them in her breast pocket. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any sympathy. "You are right, Mrs. Thorne," Harper said, her voice cutting through the night air like a razor. "It does not make sense for a retired mechanic to have access to a federal honeypot server. It does not make sense for a mechanic to know how to code a mirror interface that bypasses military-grade encryption." Jessica nodded frantically. "Yes, exactly. So arrest him." Harper shook her head slowly. A look of pity crossed her face. Not pity for Jessica's situation, but pity for her stupidity. "You really don't know who he is, do you?" Harper asked softly. "You lived in his house. You ate his food. You spent his money. And you never once asked who Winston King actually was before he retired." Jessica blinked, confused. "He fixed cars," she whispered. "He had a shop." Harper turned away from Jessica. She turned her back on the screaming woman and the cowering son in the doorway. She walked toward me. Her posture changed. The aggressive stance of the arresting officer vanished, replaced by a rigid, formal discipline. She stopped exactly 3 feet in front of me. She snapped her heels together. The sound was sharp and distinctive, a military cadence that I had not heard directed at me in 5 years. She raised her right hand in a crisp, perfect salute. "Commander King," she said, her voice ringing out with absolute respect. "Operation Sparrow is complete. The target has been secured. The assets are frozen. We await your orders for the debriefing." I stood there holding my suitcase. I looked at Harper, then I looked at the badge on my own belt, which I had not yet put on but which I carried in my soul. I straightened my back. The slight stoop of the old man vanished completely. I returned the salute slow and precise. "At ease, Agent Harper," I said. "Good work." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a building. Jessica stopped struggling. Her mouth hung open. She looked from Harper to me, then back to Harper. Her brain was trying to process the impossible. The man she had called a burden. The man she had mocked for shaking. The man she had tried to put in a nursing home. A federal agent was saluting him, calling him Commander. Commander, she whispered the word, tasting like ash in her mouth. Harper turned back to face her. "Winston King is not just a mechanic," Mrs. Thorne Harper said, her voice filled with pride. "He is the former deputy director of the Cyber Crimes Division. He spent 40 years hunting people much smarter and much more dangerous than you. He wrote the protocols that protect the very banking system you tried to exploit. He is a legend in this bureau. And you thought he was a senile old fool." Jessica's knees gave out. If the agents hadn't been holding her, she would have collapsed onto the driveway. The color drained from her face, leaving it a sickly shade of gray. "No," she whimpered. "No, that's not true. He listens to jazz. He wears cardigans. He is a master of camouflage," Harper interrupted. "And you walked right into his trap. You didn't hack a helpless old man, Jessica. You attacked a federal asset. You declared war on a commanding officer of the FBI, and you just lost." I walked forward then. I stepped into the circle of light. I looked down at Jessica. She looked up at me. For the first time, she saw the truth. She didn't see the father-in-law she despised. She saw the hunter. She saw the predator she had foolishly tried to corner. "Dad," she choked out, tears streaming down her face again. "Dad, please. I didn't know." "Ignorance is not a defense, Jessica," I said, my voice calm but hard as granite. "You judged me by my age. You judged me by my skin color. You thought I was weak because I was kind. You thought I was stupid because I was silent. But in my world, silence isn't weakness. Silence is how you load the weapon." I looked over her shoulder at the house. Jordan was standing in the doorway. He was gripping the door frame, his knuckles white. He had heard everything. He looked at me with a mixture of terror and awe. He had grown up thinking I fixed transmissions and changed oil. He had never known where I went on those long business trips. He had never known why I insisted on privacy in my study. He had bought into the lie because it was easier than asking questions. And now he realized that the man he had betrayed, the man he had allowed his wife to abuse, was a giant. And he was just a small man standing in a shadow he didn't understand. Commander King Harper said, breaking the tension. "Transport is ready. Do you want to ride with the prisoner?" "No," I said. I have nothing more to say to her. I looked at Jessica one last time. "You wanted the money, Jessica," I said. "You wanted the lifestyle. Well, the federal government will provide you with a secure room, 3 meals a day, and a very strict schedule. It is not the life you wanted, but it is the one you earned." "Take her away," I ordered. Harper nodded to the agents. "Get her out of here." Jessica started screaming again as they dragged her toward the car, but the scream was different now. It wasn't angry. It was the sound of pure regret. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had thrown away a diamond because she thought it was glass. "Dad, Jordan. Help me." The patrol car door slammed shut, cutting off her voice. The lock clicked. I stood in the driveway, breathing in the cool night air. The flashing blue and red lights painted the house in a chaotic rhythm. Harper stepped closer to me. "Sir," she said quietly, "your son, do you want us to detain him as well? He is listed as a co-conspirator on the warrant." I looked at Jordan. He had collapsed onto his knees in the doorway, weeping into his hands. He looked broken. He had lost his wife. He had lost his house. He had lost his father. I looked at Harper. "No," I said. "He is not a criminal, Harper. He is just a casualty. Leave him. His punishment is staying here in this empty house knowing what he did. That is a prison worse than anything we have at the Bureau." Harper nodded. "Understood, sir." I picked up my suitcase. "Let's go, Harper," I said. "I have a lot of paperwork to file." and I believe there is a cold case file on my desk that needs attention. Yes, Commander. I walked toward the van. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the son who was sobbing in the dark. The operation was over. The cancer had been cut out. It was painful. It was bloody. But the patient would survive. And Winston King was finally back on duty. The interrogation room at the federal building is designed to strip a person of their humanity. It is a box of gray concrete and brushed steel kept at a temperature of 62 degrees. There are no windows. There is no clock. The only sound is the low, menacing hum of the ventilation system, which cycles the air but never quite removes the smell of fear and stale sweat. Jessica sat at the metal table. She had been there for 6 hours. The expensive silk robe she had been arrested in was now wrinkled and stained. Her makeup had run, leaving dark streaks down her face that looked like war paint gone wrong. Her hands were cuffed to the bar, bolted to the floor. She was shivering uncontrollably. She was waiting for a lawyer. She was waiting for Jordan. She was waiting for anyone to come through that heavy steel door and tell her this was all a misunderstanding. When the door finally opened, she sat up straight, hope flaring in her eyes. But it was not a lawyer. It was me. I walked into the room carrying a thick manila dossier under my arm. I was not wearing the cardigans she mocked. I was not walking with the stoop she despised. I moved with the fluid economy of a man who has spent 40 years entering rooms just like this one to break people much tougher than her. I pulled out the metal chair opposite her. It scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made her flinch. I sat down. I placed the dossier on the table. I did not open it. I just looked at her. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was cracked and dry. "Thank God. Please tell them. Tell them who I am. Get me out of here." I looked at her with the flat affect of a shark. "There is no Dad in this room. Jessica," I said. My voice was low, devoid of any familial warmth. "In this room I am Senior Special Agent King, and you are Subject 892. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. "Stop it," she hissed. "Stop acting. The game is over. You got me arrested. Congratulations. You proved your point. Now drop the charges." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Drop the charges," I repeated. "You think this is a civil dispute? You think this is a family squabble that can be settled with an apology and a handshake?" I placed my hand on the dossier. "This file contains 300 pages of evidence, Jessica. It documents every single keystroke you made on your phone for the last 72 hours. I opened the file. I pulled out a photo. It was a screenshot of her installing the malware on my phone at the dinner table. "Let me explain how the Federal Bureau of Investigation works," I said, leaning forward. "When you installed that keylogger app, you thought you were hacking a senile old man. You thought you were creating a back door into my bank account." Jessica looked at the photo. Her hands were trembling in the cuffs. "But what you actually did was attempt a forced entry into a secured federal server," I continued. "That phone wasn't just a phone. It was a terminal connected to the Cybercrimes Division. The moment you installed that app, you didn't hack me. You logged yourself directly into our honeypot." "Honeypot," she whispered, confused. "It is a trap, Jessica. A server designed to look like a vulnerable bank account. We use it to catch international hackers. We use it to catch terrorists. And you walked right in the front door and announced yourself." I flipped the page. "Here is a log of your GPS coordinates," I said, pointing to a map. "Here is a transcript of every text message you sent to your brother. Here is a recording of you screaming at me to sign the nursing home papers." I looked her in the eye. "Every time you opened that app, you weren't checking my balance. You were signing a confession. You were building your own prison cell brick by brick. And you did it with such arrogance that we didn't even have to encrypt the data. We just watched you do it." Jessica began to cry. Not the angry tears of the driveway, but the terrified tears of a child who realizes the monster in the closet is real. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I just wanted the money. We were drowning, Dad. Jordan and we were drowning in debt. And whose fault was that?" I asked, cutting her off. "Did I buy the Porsche? Did I buy the designer clothes? Did I lease the house you couldn't afford?" "No, you did. You wanted a lifestyle you didn't earn. And when you couldn't pay for it, you decided to cannibalize the one person you thought was weak." She looked down at the table. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I will pay it back. I will sell everything. Just please, don't let me go to prison." I leaned back in my chair. I looked at the ceiling. "You know, Jessica," I said, my voice softening just enough to let the knife twist deeper. "I was going to let it go." She looked up, hope flickering again. "When you stole the $5,000 for the dinner, I filed it as a misdemeanor," I said. "I thought maybe I could scare you. Maybe I could teach you a lesson and you would stop. I was prepared to put you on probation. I was prepared to let you keep your freedom for Jordan's sake." The hope in her eyes grew brighter. "Really?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But then you made a choice that took this out of my hands and put it into the hands of the United States government." I pulled out the final document from the file. It was a transaction report. The numbers were highlighted in red. $200,000. "You wired money to Ricky," I said. "He was in trouble," she pleaded. "They were going to kill him." "I know," I said. "Ricky owes money to bad people." "But do you know who those people are, Jessica?" She shook her head. "Loan sharks. Bookies." I slid the paper across the table. "That routing number belongs to a shell corporation for the Sinaloa cartel," I said. "They are not bookies. They are narco-terrorists. They traffic drugs. They traffic weapons. They traffic human beings." Jessica stared at the paper. The blood drained from her face. "When you hit send on that transfer," I said, my voice hard as iron, "you stopped being a greedy daughter-in-law. You became a financier of international terrorism. Under the Patriot Act, that is a level 1 felony. It carries a mandatory minimum sentence." "How long?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I looked at her. I saw the ruin of her life reflected in the steel table. 25 years, I said. "No parole." She screamed. It was a short, sharp sound of agony. She pulled against the cuffs, rattling the table. "No, you are lying. It was for my brother. I am not a terrorist." "Intent does not matter," I said calmly. The money moved. The law was broken. You funded an enemy of the state. There is no lawyer in the world who can talk you out of this. I stood up. I closed the file. 25 years, Jessica. You will be 54 years old when you get out. Jordan will be remarried. Your friends will have forgotten you. The world will have moved on. I picked up the dossier. She looked at me, her eyes wide with begging. "Dad, please. You are powerful. You are a commander. You can stop this. You can delete the file. Please. I am family." I looked down at her. "Family," I repeated. Family doesn't put their father in a nursing home to steal his pension. Family doesn't call their father a racial slur in front of their husband. Family doesn't break the things that matter. I turned toward the door. "You are not family, Jessica," I said without looking back. "You are a case number." And I just closed the case. I walked to the door and knocked twice. The guard opened it immediately. "Wait," Jessica screamed. "Wait. What about Jordan? What did you do to him?" I stopped in the doorway. "I didn't do anything to Jordan," I said. "You did. You broke him. And now I have to go pick up the pieces." I stepped out into the hallway. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, cutting off her screams. I stood in the corridor for a moment, adjusting my tie. The silence was heavy. Agent Harper was waiting for me, holding a cup of coffee. "She didn't take the plea deal, Sir?" Harper asked. "I didn't offer one," I replied, taking the coffee. Some people only learn when the door locks from the outside. We walked down the hallway together, the sound of our footsteps echoing on the tile. Behind us in the cold gray room, Jessica Thorne was left alone with the echo of her own choices. The interrogation was over, but her sentence had just begun. The interrogation room next door was not quiet. The walls of the federal building are thick, but they cannot completely muffle the sound of a man falling apart. I stood in the hallway, adjusting the cuffs of my shirt, listening to the sobbing coming from room B. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of a child who has broken a vase and is waiting for his father to glue it back together. But some things cannot be glued. Some things are shattered into dust. I nodded to the guard stationed at the door. He stepped aside, unlocking the heavy steel barrier. I pushed the door open. Jordan was sitting on a metal bench, his head buried in his hands. When he heard the door open, he scrambled up. He looked like a wreck. His designer shirt was untucked, his eyes were swollen shut from crying, and he smelled of fear and expensive cologne that had turned sour with sweat. "Dad," he gasped, rushing toward me. He stopped just short of hugging me. The The badge on my belt and the cold look in my eyes created a force field he dared not cross. Instead, he dropped to his knees. My son, the architect, the man who wanted to be part of high society, was kneeling on a dirty government floor begging. "Dad, please," he choked out, grabbing the hem of my jacket. "You have to fix this. You have to get her out. They are talking about 20 years, Dad. They are talking about terrorism. It is insane. Jessica isn't a terrorist. She just made a mistake." I looked down at him. I did not feel anger. I felt a hollow, aching pity. "Stand up, Jordan," I said, my voice flat. "Stand up and act like a man." He didn't move. He clung tighter. "You are the commander," he pleaded, his voice rising in hysteria. "I heard them. Agent Harper said you run the division. You have power. You can make a call. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding. Please, Dad. She is my wife. If she goes to prison, I lose everything." I reached down and peeled his fingers off my jacket one by one. I stepped back, creating a distance between us that felt like miles. "You want me to use my power?" I asked quietly. "Yes," he sobbed, nodding frantically. "Yes, just this once." I walked over to the small metal table and leaned against it. I looked at him with the clinical detachment of a judge delivering a sentence. "You misunderstand what power is, son," I said. "Power is not the ability to break the rules. Power is the discipline to enforce them, especially when it hurts." I pointed at the wall that separated us from Jessica. "Your wife did not get a parking ticket, Jordan. She logged into a classified federal server. She bypassed military encryption. And she wired funds to a cartel that decapitates people for sport." Jordan shook his head, covering his ears. "She didn't know. She didn't mean to. She did it out of greed," I cut in, my voice sharp as a whip. "And she did it out of arrogance. She thought the rules didn't apply to her because she was smart and I was just a dumb old man." Jordan looked up, tears streaming down his face. "But I love her, Dad." I looked at him, and for the first time I let the disappointment show on my face. It was a heavy, tangible thing. "You don't love her, Jordan," I said. "You fear her. You are addicted to the validation she gives you. You think that because she is beautiful and white and ambitious that she elevates you. You think she makes you better." I walked closer to him, forcing him to look me in the eye. "But tell me, son, does a woman who loves you call your father a racial slur in your own living room?" Jordan flinched. He tried to look away, but I wouldn't let him. "I heard her. Jordan," I continued, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I heard her call me a useless old black man. I heard her say I was dragging down your social status. And I watched you. I watched my own son standing there silent. You let her strip away my dignity because you were too afraid of losing her approval." "Dad, I was scared," Jordan stammered. "You were not scared," I said. "You were complicit. You chose her version of the world, a world where I am a burden and she is the queen. You kicked me out of the house I paid for. You handed me papers to a nursing home. You were ready to let me die alone in a sterilized room just so she could turn my bedroom into a yoga studio." Jordan buried his face in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." "Sorry does not change the law, Jordan," I said, "and it does not change who you are." I straightened up, adjusting my jacket. "I am a federal agent. I took an oath to protect this country from enemies both foreign and domestic. Your wife is now a domestic enemy. I will not intervene. I will not make a call. I will not tarnish 40 years of service to save a woman who would have stepped over my dead body to get a Porsche." Jordan looked up, his eyes wide with horror. "So that is it. You are just going to let her rot in there. She built that cell herself," I said. "I am just locking the door." I turned to leave. "Dad, wait," Jordan cried, scrambling to his feet. "What about me? What am I supposed to do? The house, the accounts. Everything is frozen. I have nowhere to go." I stopped at the door. I looked back at him. He looked small. He looked like a child lost in a supermarket. "You are an architect, Jordan," I said. "You build things." I paused, letting the weight of my next words settle over him. "Go build a backbone. Start from scratch. Get a job. Rent a small apartment. Learn what it is like to survive without a safety net. Learn what it is like to be a man, not an accessory to a woman's vanity." "But I am alone," he whispered. I looked at him one last time. "We are all alone in the end, son," I said. "The only difference is some of us have our dignity to keep us company. You gave yours away. Now you have to go find it." I opened the door. "Dad, please." He begged, his voice breaking. "Goodbye, Jordan," I said. I stepped out into the hallway and let the heavy steel door slam shut. The sound echoed like a gavel. I stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. The air in the hallway was cool and clean. Inside that room, my son was falling apart. But I could not hold him together anymore. He had to break. It was the only way he would ever learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Agent Harper was waiting at the end of the hall. She looked at me, searching my face for any sign of hesitation. "Is he in custody, sir?" she asked. "No," I said, walking toward the exit. "He is free to go. But I don't think he knows where to go yet." We walked out of the building into the bright morning sun. The city was waking up. People were rushing to work, oblivious to the tragedy that had just played out in the cells below. I put on my sunglasses. "Drive me to the old office, Harper," I said. "I have a lot of work to catch up on." As the car pulled away, I looked out the window. I didn't see my son coming out of the building. He was still in there, sitting in the wreckage of his life. It was a hard lesson, the hardest I had ever taught. But as every father knows, sometimes the only way to save your child is to let them burn. The air in the federal courtroom was cold and heavy with the smell of old wood and floor wax. It had been exactly 6 months since the night the lights went out on the porch of the house I once called home. 6 months of silence from my son. 6 months of legal maneuvers from the woman who thought she could outsmart the government. I stood outside the heavy double doors of the courtroom, adjusting the stiff collar of my dress uniform. For decades, I had kept this part of my life in the shadows. I had kept the medals and the ribbons tucked away in a velvet-lined box in a room my family barely entered. But today the shadows were gone. I was no longer the retired mechanic with trembling hands. I was Commander Winston King. When I entered the room, the murmuring of the gallery died down instantly. I moved with a military precision that silenced every whisper. My back was straight, and the medals on my chest clinked softly with every step. I could feel the eyes of the jury on me. They were not looking at a victim. They were looking at the man who stood on the wall between them and the chaos of the world. Jessica sat at the defense table. She looked haggard. The designer dresses were gone, replaced by a drab charcoal suit provided by her legal aid. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her skin was the color of dry parchment. When she saw me in my uniform, her jaw dropped. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. She finally understood that the man she had mocked for his age was a man who had been decorated for his bravery long before she was even born. Jordan was sitting in the back row. He looked like a shadow of his former self. He looked at me with a mixture of shame and awe. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. He just stared at the medals on my chest as if trying to reconcile the father who fixed his car with the officer standing before him. The defense attorney, a sharp man in an expensive suit, stood up. He looked at me with a practiced sneer. "Commander King," he began, his voice echoing through the silent room. "You claim to be a victim of fraud, but isn't it true that you used your extensive knowledge of cybersecurity to create a trap? Isn't it true that you led my client into a situation she didn't understand?" I sat on the witness stand, my hands resting flat on the railing. My voice was calm and steady. "I did not lead her anywhere," I said. "I placed a door in front of her. I marked it with a warning. She chose to pick the lock. She chose to walk through it. But the funds were fake," the lawyer argued. "The account was a honeypot. You manufactured a crime. You entrapped a young woman who was simply looking out for her family's future." I leaned forward slightly. The light from the high windows caught the silver stars on my shoulders. "A crime is defined by intent and action," I said. Jessica Thorne intended to steal $4 million. She took the action of installing illegal spyware. She took the action of authorized a transfer to a known criminal organization. The fact that the money was digital fiction does not change the fact that her greed was very real. The lawyer tried to pivot. He tried to paint me as a vengeful father-in-law who was bitter about being sent to a nursing home. He tried to make the jury believe that I was a manipulator who enjoyed watching his son's wife suffer. "You wanted to humiliate her, didn't you?" he asked. "You wanted to prove you were still in control." I looked at the jury. I looked at the 12 men and women who held her fate in their hands. "I wanted my son to see the truth," I said softly. "I wanted him to see that the woman he loved valued a bank balance more than his father's life." The lawyer turned back to Jessica, smiling as if he had won. He started to speak, but I interrupted him. "There is one more piece of evidence the court has not yet heard," I said. I looked at Agent Harper, who was sitting at the prosecution table. She nodded and handed a small digital recorder to the clerk. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, standing up, "this is a recording captured by the secure device in Commander King's bedroom. It was recorded the night the defendant forced him to sign the power of attorney papers." Jessica's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. This was not part of the initial discovery. It was recovered from a secure federal backup only yesterday," the prosecutor countered. "It is highly relevant to the defendant's claim of being a victim of circumstance." The judge leaned forward. "Overruled. Play the recording." The courtroom went dead silent. The only sound was the low hiss of the speakers as they came to life. Then Jessica's voice filled the room. It was not the voice of the tired woman at the defense table. It was the sharp, venomous voice of the predator. "Sign it, old man," we heard her hiss through the speakers. The audio was crystal clear. Every word was a knife. "Do you think I care about your little speeches about souls? You are a useless old black man who is dragging us down. Sign the papers or you will never see your grandchildren again. You will die alone in a gutter and no one will even come to identify the body." The sound of the pen scratching on paper followed. Then Jessica's triumphant laugh. Finally, she said on the tape, "Pack your bags, old man. I want this room cleared for my yoga studio." The recording cut off. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm. I saw a woman on the jury cover her mouth with her hand. A man in the front row shook his head in disgust. The disgust was palpable. It was a physical weight in the room. Jessica looked like she was going to vomit. She looked at her lawyer, but he was staring at the floor. He knew then. He knew that no amount of legal maneuvering could erase the sound of that cold, calculated cruelty. I looked at Jessica. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel happy. I felt a profound sense of closure. "You called me an old man, Jessica," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. "You were right. I am old. I have seen the worst of humanity and I have spent my life fighting it. But what you failed to realize is that being old means I have the patience to wait for the truth to catch up with you." The judge banged his gavel. "This court will recess for lunch," he said, his voice stern. As the bailiff led Jessica out of the room, she didn't look at the cameras. She didn't look at her lawyer. She looked at me. For one fleeting second, I saw it in her eyes. The realization that she had lost everything because she couldn't see the man behind the cardigan. I stood up and smoothed my uniform. I walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, Jordan was waiting. He stood by the water fountain, his eyes downcast. When I walked past, he looked up. "Dad," he whispered. I stopped. I looked at my son. I saw the regret. I saw the pain. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have stood up. I should have known." I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder. It was the first time I had touched him in 6 months. "Knowing the truth is the first step, Jordan," I said. "But living with it is the hard part." I turned and walked toward the exit. Agent Harper was waiting with the car. "Where to, Commander?" she asked. I looked at the city skyline. I looked at the world that I had served for 40 years. "Home, Harper," I said. "Sir," she asked. "To the house." "No," I said. "To the apartment, the one with the jazz records and the view of the park." It is time I stopped being a commander and started being a man again. I climbed into the car, and as we drove away, I took off my hat. The trial wasn't over, but the verdict was already written in the hearts of everyone who heard that tape. Jessica Thorne was headed to a place where no yoga studio would ever be built, and Winston King was finally going to listen to some Coltrane in peace. The gavel came down with a sound that signaled the end of a long, dark chapter. It was a heavy final thud that echoed through the high ceilings of the federal courtroom. The judge did not look at Jessica with pity or anger. He looked at her with the weariness of a man who had seen too many people trade their souls for a mirage. 15 years, no bail, no possibility of early release under the federal statutes. I sat in the front row and watched the color drain from Jessica's face. It was a strange shade of gray, the color of wet cement. She didn't scream this time. She didn't have the energy left for theatrics. She just slumped in her chair as if her bones had turned to sand. The 15 years wasn't just a number. It was the rest of her youth. It was the prime of her life disappearing into the sterile hallways of a women's correctional facility. The bailiff stepped forward. The metallic click of the waist chains was the only sound in the room. They pulled her up, and for a brief second she looked toward the gallery. She was looking for Jordan, but Jordan wasn't in the front row. He was sitting in the very back, half hidden by a marble pillar. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. He didn't wave. He didn't offer a thumb of support. He just stared at the floor, his shoulders shaking with silent, exhausted sobs. The fallout for my son had been just as swift and unforgiving as the law. In the 6 months leading up to the trial, the architectural firm where he worked had conducted its own internal investigation. They didn't find that he had stolen money, but they found something worse in the eyes of their high-end clients. They found a lack of judgment. They found a man who was so easily manipulated by a criminal that he couldn't be trusted with multi-million-dollar contracts. They fired him the day the indictment was unsealed. I heard through Agent Harper that he had lost the house too. It was only fitting. The house was built on the foundation of my credit and my sacrifice, and once the federal government moved in to seize assets related to the money laundering investigation, the house was the first thing to go. He was living in a cramped one-bedroom rental on the edge of the city now, a place that smelled of old tobacco and broken dreams. He had tried to call me, many times. I saw the missed calls on my secure line before I finally decided to shut it down. I didn't hate him. I didn't want him to suffer more than he already was. But I knew that if I answered, he would beg. He would ask for money. He would ask for a place to stay. He would ask for me to fix a life that he had allowed someone else to break. And I couldn't do that. A commander knows when a position is lost. I had to let him find his own way back to being a man. I changed my number and didn't give it to him. I didn't give it to anyone except Harper in the bureau. A week after the sentencing, I went to the Federal Holding Center to sign some final paperwork. It was a bright, crisp morning. The air felt clean, the kind of air that makes you feel like you can start over at 71. I was standing on the sidewalk outside the facility waiting for Agent Harper to bring the car around. I wasn't wearing my uniform today. I was wearing a simple, high-quality wool coat and my favorite hat. I felt light. The side gate of the facility opened. A transport bus was waiting to take the new inmates to the long-term prison upstate. A line of women in orange jumpsuits shuffled out, chained together at the ankles. Jessica was the third in line. Her hair was messy, no longer the perfectly coiffed blonde mane she used to spend hundreds of dollars maintaining. She looked small. She looked ordinary. All the arrogance, all the fire, all the poison had been stripped away by the reality of a 6-by-8-foot cell. She saw me. She froze for a split second, her eyes widening. She probably expected me to be glaring at her. She probably expected me to be savoring my victory, waiting to throw one last insult in her face before she disappeared for a decade and a half. But I wasn't looking at her. I was standing there with Agent Harper, who had just pulled up in a sleek new SUV. Harper was laughing at something I had said. I was smiling, a genuine warm smile that reached my eyes. We were talking about the jazz club we were planning to visit that evening and the new project I was consulting on for the cyber division. I was alive. I was thriving. I was surrounded by people who respected me not for my money but for my mind and my character. Jessica stared at us. I saw her mouth open as if she wanted to yell something. Maybe she wanted to call me a name. Maybe she wanted to beg for a pardon. But as she looked at me, she realized the most painful truth of all. I didn't care. I didn't even glance in her direction. To me, she was just background noise. She was a ghost from a past life that I had already outgrown. I continued my conversation with Harper, gesturing toward the park across the street, laughing as a cool breeze caught my hat. I was a man with a future. She was a woman with a number. The guard nudged her forward. "Keep moving, Thorne," he barked. She stumbled, her chains rattling with a pathetic, hollow sound. She climbed onto the bus, her eyes fixed on me until the very last moment. She saw me climb into the passenger seat of the SUV. She saw the door close with a solid, expensive thud. She saw us pull away into the bright morning sun, leaving her behind in the exhaust and the shadows. As we drove away, I looked at my hands. They weren't trembling, not even a little. The tremor that Jessica had mocked the weakness she thought she could exploit was gone. It had been a symptom of the stress of living with a parasite. Now that the parasite was gone, the host was stronger than ever. "You okay?" Commander Harper asked, glancing at me from the driver's seat. I leaned back and watched the city skyline blur past. I thought about the new apartment I had moved into. It was smaller than the big house, but it was mine. It had a balcony that caught the sunset and a room dedicated entirely to my music. There were no hidden microphones. There were no spyware apps. There were no people whispering insults in the next room. "I am more than okay, Harper," I said. "I am free." We turned the corner and headed toward the heart of the city. I knew that Jordan was somewhere out there, probably sitting in his small rental looking at the phone and wondering why his father wouldn't pick up. I knew that Jessica was on a bus heading toward 15 years of concrete and iron. I had spent my whole life protecting people. I had spent my career keeping the world safe from predators. And in the end, I had to do the same thing for myself. I had to be the commander of my own life. It cost me a son, perhaps, but it saved my soul. And at 71, that is the only currency that matters. I reached out and turned on the radio. A smooth trumpet solo filled the car. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. The bill had been paid in full. Justice had been served. And for the first time in a long time, the silence was beautiful. I stood on the sidewalk across from the house for the very last time. It was a beautiful Saturday morning, the kind of morning where the sun hits the manicured lawns of the suburbs just right, making everything look peaceful and perfect. But I knew better. I knew that behind those white shutters and the heavy mahogany door, a tragedy of greed had played itself out. I watched as the realtor hammered the sold sign into the soft earth of the front yard. There was no sadness in my heart. There was only a profound sense of relief. People in the neighborhood had whispered when they saw the moving trucks. They wondered why I was selling the house. They wondered where Jordan had gone. They wondered why the woman who used to host the most extravagant parties was now a headline in the federal crime section of the newspaper. I didn't owe them any explanations. I had spent 40 years in the shadows of the FBI, and I knew that the world only sees what it wants to see. They saw an old man moving out. They didn't see a commander who had finally finished his last assignment. The house was in my name. Every brick, every shingle, and every square inch of that granite kitchen Jessica loved so much had been paid for by my service. Jordan had assumed he would inherit it. Jessica had assumed it was already hers to command. They were both wrong. You do not inherit respect, and you do not earn a home through manipulation. I sold the house for a significant profit, every penny of which was clean and honest. I took that money and I didn't look back. I didn't buy a bigger mansion. I didn't buy a faster car. I went back to where my story began. I used the proceeds from the sale to open the King Legacy Cyber Center. I didn't build it in a fancy corporate park. I built it in the heart of a neighborhood where the kids are often told that their only way out is through a ball or a microphone. I wanted to give them a third option. I wanted to give them a keyboard. The center is a state-of-the-art facility filled with the latest servers, high-speed fiber optics, and the kind of encryption software that makes the big tech companies nervous. But more than that, it is a sanctuary. I spend my days there now. I don't wear a uniform, and I don't carry a badge, but I'm still on duty. I walk through the rows of glowing blue monitors watching the faces of young men and women who look just like I did 50 years ago. I see the same hunger in their eyes, the hunger for knowledge, the hunger for a way to protect their families and build something that lasts. I teach them the things the Bureau taught me. I teach them that code is a language of power, and that in the digital age, a firewall is as important as a front door. I remember one boy, Marcus, who came in 3 weeks ago. He was quiet, his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the floor. He reminded me so much of Jordan, but without the weakness. He was just looking for a chance. Yesterday, I watched him successfully navigate a complex penetration test I had designed. When he finally broke through the final layer of encryption, he didn't scream or brag. He just looked at me and gave a small, confident nod. In that moment, I knew the money from the house was being put to its best possible use. I wasn't just building a school, I was building an army of the mind. Agent Harper comes by often. She is a section chief, now moving up the ranks just like I knew she would. We sit in the center's small break room drinking coffee and talking about the old days. She tells me about the cases she is working on, and sometimes she asks for my advice on a particularly difficult encryption. I listen and I offer what I can, but I always tell her the same thing. Watch the people, Harper. The machines never lie, but the people will tell you whatever they think you want to hear. She always laughs and tells me I should come back to the Bureau, but she knows the answer. My watch is different now. I moved into a small apartment near the park. It is simple, clean, and quiet. There are no hidden cameras. There are no spyware apps. There are no people whispering about my social status in the next room. My jazz records are organized perfectly on a shelf I built myself. I have a small balcony where I sit and watch the sunset over the city. It is a quiet life, but it is an authentic one. I am no longer a target, and I am no longer a hunter. I am just a man who knows exactly who he is. Tonight I am sitting in my new office at the center. The building is dark except for the soft blue hum of the servers in the basement. I am sitting at a mahogany desk much smaller than the one I had at the bureau, but it feels more substantial. On the corner of the desk sits the silver frame I salvaged from the wreckage of my old room. I fixed the glass myself. I polished the silver until it shone like new. Inside the frame is the photo of Betty. She is still laughing. She is still beautiful. I poured myself a glass of red wine, the kind Betty used to buy for our anniversaries. I sat back in my chair and looked at her face for a long time. The silence in the office was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaotic noise of the last few months. I felt the weight of the years, but I also felt the strength of the survival. I raised my glass to the photo, the red wine catching the light from the computer screen. "Do you see this, Betty?" I whispered. My voice was steady, filled with a deep, quiet satisfaction. "I did it. I done dep song rak roy. I cleaned up the mess. The house is gone, and the people who tried to stain our name are exactly where they belong. The trash has been taken out and the air is finally clear." I took a sip of the wine, letting the warmth settle in my chest. I looked out the window at the city lights. I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't felt in years. I had protected my legacy. I had taught my lesson, and I had turned the pain of betrayal into a bridge for the next generation. I looked back at my computer monitor. I had a final diagnostic running on the center's security network. I watched the lines of code scroll past a beautiful, orderly dance of logic and truth. Suddenly, the scrolling stopped. The screen cleared, and in the center of the darkness, a single line of text appeared in bright, confident green. "System secure. I mim kui." I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting the soft jazz playing from my speakers fill the room. The system was secure. My life was secure. And for the first time in 71 years, I knew that the world was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Arrogance acts as a blindfold, causing predators to mistake patience for weakness and silence for submission. Jessica believed that age and kindness rendered a person obsolete, failing to realize that true power doesn't need to announce itself at a dinner table. In her race to exploit what she thought was easy prey, she sprinted directly into a trap built by decades of experience. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who threaten you loudly. They are the ones who quietly hand you the shovel, watch you dig your own grave, and then simply close the gate. If you believe that dignity and respect are worth more than any bank account, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let us know in the comments if you think Winston made the right choice by walking away from his son. Your support helps us bring more stories of justice and resilience to life. Check out the other videos on your screen for more gripping tales from the files of Dung Chuyen Dan Ong. See you in the next story.